The American Civil War, a nation shattered and reborn. In the heart of a young republic, a storm brewed, not of clouds, but of ideals, ambition, and irreconcilable truths. The American Civil War tore a nation asunder, pitting brother against brother, faith against faith, and dream against dream. It was a crucible of fire and blood, where courage clashed with cruelty. And the soul of America was forged anew. Before the cannons roared at Fort Sumter, before the fields of Gettysburg were stained crimson, the seeds of division were sown deep within a land both proud and fractured. This is the saga of a house divided, of a people tested, and of a nation forever transformed. Join us as we step into the shadows of a gathering tempest, into the inferno of a war that reshaped the United States. Chapter 1: The Gathering Tempest. The year is 1850. And the United States teeters on the edge of destiny. From the cobblestone streets of Boston to the sun-scorched cotton fields of Mississippi, a nation pulses with ambition, yet trembles with discord. Wealth flows, power grows, but beneath the surface, a rift widens. The Constitution, once a beacon of unity, now feels like a fraying rope binding two Americas, one thriving on industry, innovation, and free labor, the other rooted in the chains of slavery, inherited wealth, and human suffering. These two visions no longer share a common tongue, nor do they see each other's truths. The middle ground, once a bridge, is crumbling. For decades, the nation clung to fragile compromises, delicate balances struck in hushed halls. The Missouri Compromise of 1820 drew a line across the land, north of it, freedom, south, slavery. Yet, this was no resolution, it was a postponement. Each new territory, each new state, became a battleground of principles. By 1850, California's bid for statehood reignited the feud. The South, wary of losing its grip, watched as northern voices grew bolder, demanding slavery's containment. In response, the Fugitive Slave Act was born, a law that sent federal marshals into free states to reclaim escaped souls, dragging them back to bondage. It was lawful, enforceable, and utterly abhorrent. In northern cities, defiance flared. Boston's streets echoed with clashes as mobs faced marshals. New York's abolitionist presses churned out tales of families torn apart, chained anew. Even the silent began to stir. In the South, a different narrative took hold. Slavery was no sin, they claimed, but a sacred institution, woven into their economy, defended by scripture, and passed down through generations. Southern leaders warned their people, the North seeks to dismantle your way of life, to strip your freedom to own others. Misunderstanding fueled fear, and fear widened the chasm. In 1852, Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin ignited a spark. Her novel, though fiction, rang with the weight of truth, bringing slavery's horrors into northern homes. Mothers wept, preachers raged, and in the South, fury followed. Stowe was vilified, her book banned. Yet the divide only deepened. Then came Kansas. The Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854 promised popular sovereignty, letting settlers decide their state's fate. Instead, it unleashed bloodshed. Pro-slavery and anti-slavery settlers poured in, armed and unyielding. Towns burned, men fell, and families fled. Bleeding Kansas. The papers called it a war in miniature. A nation's wound laid bare. From this chaos rose new voices, fierce and unshakable. Abraham Lincoln, a lanky Illinois lawyer, emerged in 1858. His debates with Senator Stephen Douglas captivating the nation. Lincoln warned, "A house divided against itself cannot stand." He saw the path ahead. A nation could not endure half slave, half free. His words resonated in the North, but in the South, they stoked dread. Another figure arose, not with words but with fire. John Brown, driven by unyielding faith, believed slavery's sin demanded blood. In 1859, he raided the federal arsenal at Harper's Ferry, Virginia, aiming to arm the enslaved and spark rebellion. His plan failed, and he was hanged. but his final words echoed like thunder. The crimes of this guilty land will never be purged away but with blood. To the South, Brown was no martyr but a harbinger of Northern aggression. By 1860, the nation stood at the precipice. Lincoln's election, on a pledge to halt slavery's spread, was to the South a death knell. On December 20th, South Carolina seceded, followed by Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas. The Confederate States of America rose, with its own flag, president, and constitution, a nation built on the right to enslave. In the North, shock gave way to resolve. The Union was more than a government, it was an ideal, and its fracture was unthinkable. Lincoln, now president, faced an impossible choice as the nation spiraled toward conflict. In Charleston Harbor, Fort Sumter stood as a lone Union outpost, surrounded by Confederate forces. Lincoln sent supplies, not arms. But the South would not yield. At 4:30 a.m. on April 12, 1861, Confederate guns roared, shattering the dawn. The war had begun. Yet this is not the tale of that first shot, but of the whispers that led to it, of a nation that grew too swiftly, ignored too much, and let ideals clash with greed. It was a war fought long before the cannons, in hearts, pulpits, and courtrooms, a storm that rose silently until it broke, not just for land, but for the soul of a nation. Chapter 2: The Great American Deception. They called it the Land of Liberty. A realm where a man could speak freely, worship as he chose, and rise by his own hand. Born not of crowns but of ideals, the United States shimmered with the promise of freedom. Yet, that promise was a half-truth, shadowed by a contradiction etched into its very birth. The Declaration of Independence proclaimed all men equal, penned by men who owned other men. They spoke of rights while forging chains, of justice while denying it to millions. This was no hidden shame. It was woven into the nation's fabric. By the 1800s, slavery was more than a practice. It was the South's lifeblood. Vast plantations of cotton, sugar, and tobacco thrived on the labor of nearly 4 million enslaved souls by 1860, more than the population of America's greatest cities. They were not people in the eyes of the law, but property, bought, sold, branded, and broken. The North, too, bore guilt. Though many states had abolished slavery, their banks funded Southern plantations, their mills wove Southern cotton, and their insurers valued human lives as assets. The nation's wealth, its roads, railways, and trade, carried the mark of the enslaved. In Southern towns, this system was defended with fervent certainty. Preachers claimed Scripture endorsed slavery. Planters argued they cared for their property better than Northern factories treated workers. Children grew up in a world where enslaved hands cooked their meals, sang their lullabies, and built their wealth, a world they saw as natural. But for the enslaved, it was a relentless nightmare. Families were shattered on auction blocks, parents torn from children, spouses sold apart. The whip ruled, and safety was a myth. Yet, even in this darkness, resistance glowed. Enslaved people wove secret networks of knowledge, whispered stories of freedom, and sang spirituals laced with coded paths to liberty. Many risked everything to flee, guided by stars and the Underground Railroad, a network of courage, not tracks. Harriet Tubman, a conductor of this invisible railway, returned time and again, pistol in hand, urging the fearful forward. Each escape was a defiance, each step a claim to humanity. Still, most remained trapped, their lives a cycle of toil and terror. Even in free states, liberty was incomplete. Black Americans, free or fugitive, lived under constant threat. The Fugitive Slave Act sent hunters into northern streets, snatching lives back to chains. In 1857, the Dred Scott decision struck a deeper blow. The Supreme Court ruled that no black person could be a citizen, that they had no rights which the white man was bound to respect. With a single verdict, the nation's highest court erased the Constitution's promise for millions. And yet the myth persisted. America, the beacon of freedom, unmatched in moral grandeur. It was a beautiful lie. One that let good men turn away, northern merchants profit quietly, and southern families justify horror with grace. The lie whispered that this contradiction could endure, that a house divided could stand. But slavery was not just an economy, it was a moral reckoning, a fuse waiting to ignite. As the 1850s unfolded, the pressure mounted in books, sermons, and riots. Abolitionists like Frederick Douglass, a former slave, spoke with searing truth, asking, "What, to the slave, is your 4th of July?" His words pierced, ignored by many, but not all. White abolitionists like William Lloyd Garrison burned the Constitution, calling it a pact with evil. Southern-born sisters, the Grimke siblings, denounced their heritage before crowds, naming slavery a sin against God and nation. Change came slowly, stalled by politicians, deflected by papers, and soothed by moderates pleading for patience. But how long could a nation delay its reckoning? By 1860, the question was no longer abstract. Families divided, churches split, and parties crumbled. Behind every conversation lurked the unspoken. Can a nation call itself free while built on bondage? In the South, the answer was a defiant yes. In the North, it wavered, yes for now, no in time. But in the hearts of the enslaved, the answer was carved in scars, buried with sold children, and sung in weary voices by firelight. The lie was unraveling, the illusion that two Americas could coexist fading. This was no mere clash of regions or laws, it was a battle for meaning. What is freedom? Who claims it? What price must be paid? The nation had grown believing it could be both free and chained. But history tolerates no such deception. The truth, steeped in blood, was dawning. Chapter 3: When Words Became Weapons. The American experiment was built on words, declarations, debates, and documents crafted to temper passion with reason. From Independence Hall to frontier cabins, Americans trusted that words could solve, compromise, and preserve their republic. But by the late 1850s, that faith faltered. Words, once bridges, became blades sharpened to wound, not heal. The center collapsed, and the nation's bonds frayed into dust. The erosion was slow. Compromise by compromise, as the nation tried to bind two irreconcilable visions under one flag. The Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854 tore the final veil. Senator Stephen Douglas proposed letting settlers vote on slavery's fate in new territories, calling it popular sovereignty. He promised democracy. Instead, he unleashed chaos. The Missouri Compromise's line was erased, and Kansas became a crucible. Settlers flooded in, not to build, but to battle. Pro-slavery and anti-slavery factions clashed, torching towns, stuffing ballots, and spilling blood. John Brown and his sons hacked 5 pro-slavery men to death at Pottawatomie Creek, their broadswords gleaming with vengeance. Retaliation followed, and Kansas bled. In Washington, politicians debated while Kansas burned. The moderates, giants like Henry Clay and Daniel Webster, were gone, their successors lacking their weight. The political center vanished, and extremists filled the void. In 1856, the Senate itself became a battlefield. Charles Sumner, a fiery abolitionist, delivered a blistering speech, mocking Southern leaders as cowards wedded to slavery's harlot. Days later, Congressman Preston Brooks, kin to one Sumner insulted, walked into the Senate chamber and beat him senseless with a cane. Sumner collapsed, bloodied, and Brooks struck until the cane shattered. No one intervened. In the South, Brooks was hailed, gifted new canes inscribed with, "Hit him again." Civility was dead. Violence was ascendant. The Whig Party, once a pillar, crumbled under slavery's weight, giving way to the Republican Party, born to halt slavery's spread. To the South, this was no policy, it was a declaration of war. The Dred Scott decision of 1857 fanned the flames. The Supreme Court not only denied Dred Scott's freedom but declared the Missouri Compromise unconstitutional. opening all territories to slavery. The North reeled, seeing a slave power seizing control. The South rejoiced, their cause sanctified by law. Yet the tools of compromise, courts, debates, laws, were failing. In 1858, Lincoln and Douglas clashed in Illinois, their debates drawing thousands. Lincoln argued slavery's moral wrong, warning it must not spread. Douglas defended choice, even for bondage. Beneath their words, the ground shifted. Lincoln lost the Senate seat but gained a national voice. A year later, John Brown struck again, seizing Harper's Ferry's arsenal to arm a slave rebellion. His raid failed, but his execution made him a martyr. Northern bells tolled for him, Southern militias drilled, fearing more Browns. Words had failed, action was rising. The election of 1860 was the final fracture. Lincoln's victory, without a single Southern vote, signaled the end of compromise. South Carolina seceded, followed by 6 others, forming the Confederate States of America. Their Constitution enshrined slavery, their president, Jefferson Davis, vowing independence. In Washington, the Senate grew silent, its voices of reason gone. The nation had exhausted its language, and fire would speak next. Chapter 4: A Nation Set Aflame. Winter gripped the Carolinas in 1860, cloaking tobacco fields in frost and hushing small towns under a brittle chill. Yet, beneath the quiet, a fire smoldered, not of nature, but of a nation unraveling. In dimly lit rooms across the South, men whispered of rights, honor, and a world under siege. They spoke of fate, of courage, and of fear, for they knew their way of life teetered on the edge of oblivion. Secession was no mere protest. It was a clarion call to war. South Carolina led the charge, bold and unyielding. On December 20, 1860, its legislature declared the state free from the Union, a simple proclamation with cataclysmic weight. The North reeled, first in stunned silence, then in fury. Calls for diplomacy clashed with cries for action, but no one asked for compromise. They asked, "What now?" Mississippi followed on January 9th, then Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas. One by one, they forged the Confederate States of America, a new nation with its own flag, its own president, Jefferson Davis, and a vision of liberty rooted in the chains of slavery. In Washington, D.C., the capital buzzed with unease. Carriages rattled through marble-lined streets, shopkeepers swept sidewalks, and fathers guided children past the Potomac. But beneath the city's pulse, anxiety flickered. Each day brought news of another state's defection, threatening to unravel the Union forever. Lincoln, newly elected, vowed to preserve it at all costs. But Southern leaders saw his presidency as a death sentence for their world. In Montgomery, Alabama, the Confederacy built its capital, where Davis spoke of self-determination, untainted by Northern meddling. Yet beneath the soaring words lay a darker truth: war was coming. The South armed itself, forging an army, and seizing federal forts, except one. Fort Sumter stood defiant in Charleston Harbor, a lone bastion of Union resolve surrounded by Confederate guns. Major Robert Anderson, its commander, clung to dwindling supplies, his men weary but steadfast. Lincoln sent ships with food, not arms, a gesture of restraint. The Confederacy demanded surrender, vowing to fire on any supply vessel. Both sides held their breath, circling like duelists in the dawn mist. Then, at 4:18 a.m. on April 12, 1863, the sky shattered. Confederate artillery roared, shells tearing through the night, splintering wood, and igniting Fort Sumter's walls. The war had begun. Anderson's men answered weakly, their lone volley swallowed by the darkness. For hours, the bombardment raged. Charleston's citizens watching from rooftops, some weeping, others cheering. By dusk, Anderson raised a white flag, evacuating his battered garrison without a single life lost. But the cost was immeasurable. Word of Sumter's fall spread like wildfire, from Maine to Missouri. In the North, Lincoln called for 75,000 volunteers to crush the rebellion, igniting a fervor of flags and martial tunes. In the South, men flocked to enlist, kissing loved ones goodbye, vowing to defend their new nation's honor. Two Americas born of the same dream, now hurtled toward collision. In Richmond, Virginia, the Confederacy seized federal arsenals, preparing for battle. In Washington, newspapers thundered, "Rebels shall be crushed!" The war machine hummed, but beneath the rallies, a whisper lingered, not of unity, but of devastation. This was no skirmish. It was a reckoning, a fire that would consume not just forts but lives, cities, and faith. The nation held its breath, for what lay ahead was not merely a fight for land, but a battle for its very soul. Chapter 5. The Day the Union Fractured. At 4 a.m. on April 12, 1861. Charleston Harbor lay still, its waters mirroring a sky just kissed by dawn. Palmettos drooped heavy with dew, and the air held a sacred hush. But this peace was fragile, trembling beneath the weight of history. On Sullivan's Island, young Confederates, barely men, stood resolute, their hands gripping cannons hauled into place under night's cover. These guns, Rodman and Dahlgren, were not mere metal, they were declarations of defiance, of a new nation's resolve. In Fort Sumter, Major Robert Anderson stood beneath the stars and stripes, the flag snapping in the pre-dawn breeze. Granite walls encircled his men, solid yet strained, their supplies nearly gone, their morale frayed by weeks of standoff. Anderson refused to yield. The Confederacy refused to wait. Then came the first flash, a shell arcing across the water, time slowing as its scream shattered the silence. Stone crumbled, waters rippled, and a nation quaked. Sumter's lone reply was feeble, a hollow plea lost in the fog. Silence returned, but it was heavy with consequence. Over 400 shells rained down that morning, each a story of broken promises and seething resentment. Inside the fort, men crouched, clutching rifles, some veterans, others trembling recruits. They counted the seconds between booms, prayed, and braced for siege. Charleston's citizens pressed against windows, watching flashes light the sky, feeling the ground shudder. Some wept, others cheered, mothers clutched children, and shopkeepers shuttered doors. It was a festival of fear, electric and terrible. By midday, the Confederate guns paused, their crews reloading. Anderson paced the ramparts, the flag still flying, tattered but defiant. The bombardment resumed, shells collapsing stairways, ammunition dwindling. A haze of black powder choked the air, tasting of iron and dread. Anderson saw the inevitable. With no reinforcements, with holes yawning in the walls, he signaled surrender. A truce allowed his men to evacuate, battered but unbroken, marching to a boat under a darkening sky. The flag came down, torn and stained, folded with care as the guns fell silent. Word of Sumter's fall raced across the land, faster than steamships or telegraphs. From Pennsylvania to Texas, men wept. A doctor in Albany wrote, "We have crossed the Rubicon." A farmer in Iowa noted, "The birds' songs will never sound the same." In Washington, Lincoln paced, his voice trembling as he summoned 75,000 troops to quell the rebellion, hoping resolve would restore the Union. In Montgomery, Jefferson Davis hailed victory, calling for volunteers to secure independence, stoking Southern pride and fear. Fort Sumter stood quiet, its scars a monument to cost and cause. That storm of cannon fire changed everything. Congressional halls now echoed with war drums. Battle lines drawn not in maps but in flesh and steel. In northern towns, men left plows and shops, boarding trains to camps of camaraderie and disease. In the South, husbands and sons spoke of liberty and vengeance, marching toward Virginia's fields. Both sides filled their arsenals and altars, buckling under ambition's weight. The war had arrived. Not polite or brief, but a blaze that would burn the nation to its bones. Chapter 6. The picnic turned to panic. July 21, 1861, dawned soft over northern Virginia, dew glistening on grass. Birds darting through trees. The air buzzed with festivity, as if war were a distant tale. Families streamed to Bull Run Creek near Manassas Junction, not for battle but for spectacle. Wicker baskets overflowed with fried chicken, lemon cakes, and berries. Children twirled parasols, their laughter light. Carriages delivered them to gentle slopes, where servants spread linens and mothers chatted, expecting a patriotic pageant. Soldiers mingled, boys in crisp uniforms, muskets slung carelessly, smiles unscarred by war's weight. Drummers tapped martial tunes. The Star-Spangled Banner, battle cry of freedom, while veterans, limping from earlier clashes, watched eagerly. It felt like a picnic with purpose. A celebration of valor to come. Then, at dawn, a gunshot cracked the serenity, sharp and solitary. Muskets roared on distant ridges, cannons thundered, and smoke swallowed the green fields. Panic surged like a tide. Crowds gasped, feet scrambled, children clung to mothers. Baskets spilled, a teaspoon clinking into berries, unnoticed amid the rifle's roar. In the fields, Union blue clashed with Confederate gray, young men firing with clear eyes or trembling hands. Horses bolted, a carriage overturned, its driver thrown. A woman's scream pierced the air. A cannonball buried itself near lovers, their laughter silenced. Bullets whizzed, shells erupted, tearing sod and limbs, screams echoing across the creek. Spectators froze, some fainting, others shielding children. A Union sergeant, uniform pristine, lay wounded in the grass, calling for water. A Confederate volunteer knelt beside him, offering a canteen. Their shared humanity a fleeting light in the smoke. Drums drowned sobs, officers' orders lost in chaos. Stonewall Jackson emerged, a legend born, standing firm, rallying broken lines with calm defiance. Cheers rose, then shattered as Union waves surged back. By midday, Confederate reinforcements tipped the scales, pushing Union troops into retreat. Regiments collapsed into woods, abandoning muskets, flags, and drums. Families fled, clutching baskets, stumbling over fences, their hats now stained. The Berkeley family, who'd brought a picnic, returned to broken glass and spilled soup, haunted by dying men's cries. The retreat became a rout, Union artillery limping away, soldiers wading Bull Run's waters, bullets overhead. Some drowned. Others were carried by comrades. When silence fell, the dead lay entwined, blue and gray, the soil dark red. Mosquitoes droned, grass flattened, rifles scattered. Survivors walked the field, carrying wounded, covering faces in grief. A Confederate medic draped a gray blanket over a Union drummer boy, no older than 13, his eyes dimmed by war's theft. In nearby towns, shells' echoes trembled, and villagers whispered, "When will it reach us?" Bull Run was no mere battle, it was a reckoning. It shattered the illusion of a swift war, of romantic flags and quick victories. It taught that war was no picnic, but a brutal truth, neighbor killing neighbor, brother fighting brother. A minister prayed beside a mass grave. God have mercy on our divided land. The air tasted of iron, smoke lingered, and spades struck soil for coffins. Bull Run was where innocence died, where the nation, still one on paper, became two in blood. Chapter 7, Shadows over Shiloh. April 6, 1862, broke with deceptive calm over southwestern Tennessee. Mist veiled the fields near Pittsburgh Landing, clinging to trees, softening their edges. The Tennessee River, wide and slow, shimmered in pale sunlight, its stillness heavy with unspoken dread. Farmers on leave dreamed of home. Congregations expected Sunday greetings, but these hopes were illusions. At the landing, Major General Ulysses S., Grant's Army of the Tennessee, nearly 40,000 strong, camped, weary from disease and exhaustion. They thought they faced a weakened foe near Shiloh Church. They were mistaken. Confederate commanders Albert Sidney Johnston and P.G.T. Beauregard, with 44,000 men, saw time as their enemy. Their Army of Mississippi, anxious but ready, planned a dawn assault to crush Grant before reinforcements arrived. The mist thinned, and at 5 a.m. the first shots shattered the quiet, a rifle's crack, artillery's boom. Men jolted from tents, some staggering, others fumbling rifles, some slain before they woke. Confederates advanced like specters, gray silhouettes slipping through smoke, bayonets fixed, faces grim. Union camps dissolved into chaos. Blue-clad regiments scrambled to hold fences, peering at gray caps through woods, unable to grasp the attack's scale. Artillery crews wrestled cannons, shouts drowned by concussions. In a grove, a volley tore through, felling Major Henry Stark mid-command. Soldiers froze, then fired back. A nurse, pulled to the wounded, later wrote. Smoke set the tone, choking lungs, hiding friend from foe. Ministers carried Bibles into the haze, musicians played lullabies. Some prayed, others stared, numb with shock. Confederates pressed forward, yelling, flags high, crashing through woods. Grant's men rallied, forming desperate pockets by brush and broken plows. Hospital tents swelled with wounded, some retreating, some praying, some fighting. A captain carried a private from floodwaters as shells screamed overhead. Pain was vivid, screams carried on the wind. Blood pooled beneath boots. Grant, wired updates, refused retreat, urging, hold until the boys come up. He awaited Don Carlos Buell's Army of the Ohio, steaming downriver. Johnston, sword drawn, paced behind Confederate lines, unfazed by shell casings. He smiled as Union lines broke, then a bullet struck his leg, severing an artery. Carried off, he bled out in the mud. His death a blow to Confederate morale. Their attack wavered, the gray tide dimming. By afternoon, Union lines reformed, fresh regiments pushing back. Soldiers paused to gather the dead, steeling their resolve. By evening, Grant's men held, not in triumph but survival, digging trenches, listening for Buell's arrival. Casualties neared 10,000, with 5,000 more wounded, moaning under torn blankets. Night fell, fires flickering, cannons, lanterns, campfires. Wounded men whispered, questioning their cause. A surgeon dressed wounds, a chaplain read psalms, horses bled. Dogs whimpered. Dawn broke on April 7th, hazier but charged. Union forces, reinforced, advanced like a slow tide, battering Confederates past Shiloh Church, peach orchards, and creeks. Exhausted and leaderless, Beauregard ordered retreat. Confederates fell back, forming desperate rings, some charging to cover escapes, dying yards from comrades. By midday, Union waves prevailed, seizing guns, burying the dead. Beauregard withdrew to Corinth, Mississippi, his army broken, over 8,000 lost. Total casualties exceeded 23,000. For Grant, survival was victory, defying critics, his fame rising. For Beauregard, the assault failed, Johnston's death a wound unhealed. Shiloh was a baptism in blood, stripping war's romance. No more drills or flags, only survival, missing limbs, and nightmares. Civilians in nearby towns woke to wounded in their homes, the air rancid, wondering if they should flee. Shiloh marked history, forcing leaders to see war's demands, factories, railroads, medicine, strategy. Lincoln read dispatches, sighing at the cost but seeing the South's momentum falter. Shiloh revealed death's weight, pain's depth, and fear's grip. Soldiers carried lice, officers guilt, generals burdens, the land blood. Families awaited letters asking, did he live? Shiloh raised questions without answers, a crucible where innocence burned. And the war's true face was bared. Chapter 8. The Iron Grip Tightens. In the spring of 1862, the Mississippi River flowed slow and wide, its muddy waters carving through a nation at war with itself. Along its banks steamboats churned, not with cotton or trade, but with soldiers, cannons, and the weight of destiny. The Union, stung by early defeats, saw the river as more than a waterway. It was the Confederacy's spine, a lifeline of commerce and control. To sever it was to strangle the rebellion. In this theater of war, a new name emerged. Ulysses S. Grant, a man of quiet grit, whose resolve would reshape the conflict. Grant's eyes were fixed on Fort Donelson, a Confederate stronghold in Tennessee, its guns guarding the Cumberland River. In February 1862, he moved with precision, his army of the Tennessee bolstered by ironclad gunboats, hulking, steam-driven beasts clad in metal, their cannons spitting fire. The fort's defenders, dug into frozen earth, braced for the assault. On February 14th, Union gunboats pounded the defenses, shells screaming through icy air. But Confederate gunners held firm, repulsing the attack. Undeterred, Grant encircled the fort on land, his men enduring bitter cold, their campfires feeble against the wind. Confederate generals, trapped and desperate, launched a breakout. Their troops charged through snow, bayonets gleaming, briefly cracking Union lines. But Grant, unshaken, rallied his forces, sealing the breach. On February 16th, the fort's commander, Simon Bolivar Buckner, sent a plea for terms. Grant's reply was steel. No terms except unconditional and immediate surrender. The fort fell, its 12,000 defenders captured. The Cumberland opened to Union control. The North erupted in celebration, newspapers crowning Grant, unconditional surrender, Grant. In the South, shock gave way to dread. The Mississippi's defenses were crumbling. Grant pressed on, targeting Corinth, Mississippi, a rail hub vital to Confederate supply lines. But the war's hunger grew. In the East, Union General George B. McClellan, commanding the Army of the Potomac, launched the Peninsula Campaign, a grand plan to seize Richmond, the Confederate capital. McClellan, cautious and meticulous, landed 100,000 men on Virginia's coast, inching toward the city through swamps and rain. Confederate General Joseph E. Johnston countered, his smaller force striking at Seven Pines in May 1862. The battle was a bloody stalemate, but Johnston fell wounded, and a new commander rose, Robert E. Lee, a Virginian of quiet brilliance, whose daring would haunt the Union. Lee reorganized the Army of Northern Virginia, infusing it with discipline and audacity. In late June, he launched the 7 Days' Battles, a series of ferocious assaults to drive McClellan back. Fields churned to mud, forests blazed, and men fell in droves, 20,000 casualties in a week. McClellan, rattled, retreated to the James River. His campaign shattered. Richmond stood defiant, and Lee's legend was born. In the North, frustration mounted. Lincoln, pacing the White House, sought generals who would fight, not falter. The war, once imagined as a swift triumph, now loomed as a grinding ordeal. Yet, the Union's grip tightened in the West. New Orleans, the South's largest port, fell to Admiral David Farragut in April 1862. Its defenses outmaneuvered by Union naval might. The Mississippi, once a Confederate artery, was slipping away. Each victory brought the Union closer to splitting the rebellion in two. But the cost was staggering. Soldiers rode home of comrades lost, of fields sown with blood. Civilians, North and South, felt the war's shadow, prices soared, families mourned. And the dream of a quick end faded. The iron grip of war was unrelenting, and its next chapter would be written in blood at Antietam. Chapter 9, The Bloodiest Day. September 17, 1862. Dawned soft over Sharpsburg, Maryland, where Antietam Creek wound through rolling hills and golden cornfields. The morning mist clung low, veiling a landscape soon to be scarred. Here, two armies converged, Lee's Army of Northern Virginia, 40,000 strong, daring to invade the North, and McClellan's Army of the Potomac, 87,000 men, determined to crush the rebellion's boldest gamble. The stage was set for a day that would etch its name in blood. Lee's invasion was a desperate bid to shift the war's tide. After victories in Virginia, he sought to rally Maryland's Confederate sympathizers, threaten Washington, and sway European powers to recognize the Confederacy. His men, ragged and hungry, crossed the Potomac, their bare feet bleeding, yet their spirits high, singing, "Maryland, my Maryland!" McClellan, slow but dogged, pursued, clutching a stroke of luck. A Union soldier had found Lee's battle plans, wrapped around cigars, revealing his army's divided positions. McClellan vowed to strike, boasting, "I have the rebels in my grasp." At dawn, Union artillery roared, shells tearing through cornfields, splintering fences. The battle erupted in 3 brutal phases. In the north, Union troops under Joseph Hooker stormed the cornfield, mowing down Confederates in rows like harvest wheat. Gray lines buckled, then surged back, the field changing hands 15 times. Men fell in heaps, their screams lost in the din of musketry. By mid-morning, the cornfield was a slaughter pen. Stalks trampled, earth soaked red. In the center, Union forces assaulted a sunken road, later called Bloody Lane. Confederate defenders, shielded by the road's banks, fired volleys that cut down bluecoats in waves. For hours, the lane held, until Union troops flanked it, pouring fire into the trench. Confederates fell, stacked like cordwood. The road a river of blood. A soldier later wrote, "No man could look upon that scene and not weep." Over 5,000 lay dead or wounded in that narrow strip. In the South, Ambrose Burnside's Union Corps targeted a stone bridge over Antietam Creek. Confederate sharpshooters, perched on bluffs, repulsed 3 assaults, the bridge piling with bodies. Finally, Burnside's men crossed, only to be stalled by late arriving Confederate reinforcements under A.P. Hill. The day ended in stalemate, both armies battered, either yielding. Night fell. Lit by lanterns of surgeons sawing limbs, chaplains whispering prayers, and soldiers scavenging boots from the dead. Antietam's toll was staggering, 23,000 casualties, dead, wounded, missing, in a single day, the bloodiest in American history. Lee, outnumbered and depleted, withdrew to Virginia, his invasion thwarted. McClellan, cautious as ever, did not pursue. A decision that infuriated Lincoln. Yet, the battle's shadow stretched far. Lee's retreat gave Lincoln the victory he needed to issue the Emancipation Proclamation, a decree that would redefine the war's purpose. In Europe, Britain and France, poised to aid the Confederacy, hesitated, their support waning. For those who fought, Antietam was no victory, only survival. A Union private wrote, "I saw boys I grew up with, torn to pieces, their eyes staring at nothing." A Confederate nurse recalled, "The wounded begged for water, but we had none." Photographers captured the carnage, their images shocking northern viewers, stripping war of its glory. Antietam was a turning point, not of strategy, but of soul. It whispered a truth. This war would spare no one, and its end was nowhere in sight. Chapter 10: Freedom's Price. On September 22, 1862, Abraham Lincoln sat in the White House, his face etched with weariness, his pen poised over a document that would reshape a nation. The Emancipation Proclamation was no mere law, it was a moral thunderbolt, born of Antietam's blood-soaked fields. It declared that, on January 1, 1863, all enslaved people in Confederate-held territory would be forever free. The words were bold, but their reach was limited. Lincoln could not enforce freedom in lands he did not control. Yet, their power lay not in law, but in purpose. The proclamation transformed the war. No longer a fight to preserve the Union alone, it became a crusade for human liberty. In the North, abolitionists cheered, their long-maligned cause now enshrined. Frederick Douglass, voice trembling, called it a moral bombshell that shook slavery's foundations. But not all rejoiced. Union soldiers, many indifferent to slavery, grumbled, some deserted, unwilling to die for a cause they didn't share. In border states, where slavery remained legal, fears spread that the proclamation would spark rebellion. Lincoln stood firm, knowing the risk, but seeing no other path. In the South, The proclamation was met with defiance and dread. Confederate leaders branded Lincoln a tyrant, his decree a call for slave uprisings. Planters tightened their grip, moving enslaved people inland, away from Union lines. Yet, the news spread, carried by whispers, songs, and daring escapes. Enslaved men and women, long denied hope, saw a flicker of possibility. Thousands fled to Union camps, risking whips and bullets for a chance at freedom. These contrabands, as the Union called them, became laborers, scouts, and soldiers, their courage reshaping the war. The proclamation also shifted the world's gaze. In London and Paris, where cotton shortages had pushed sympathy toward the Confederacy, public opinion turned. Workers, many poor, rallied for the Union, seeing slavery's end as their own cause. British and French leaders, wary of backing a slave-holding nation, stepped back. The Confederacy's dream of foreign aid dimmed, its isolation deepening. Lincoln's pen had not freed a single soul yet, but it had redrawn the war's moral map. Freedom's price was steep. The proclamation made peace harder, hardening Confederate resolve to fight to the last. It also thrust black Americans into the war's heart. By 1863, the Union began recruiting black regiments, like the 54th Massachusetts, whose soldiers faced not just bullets but prejudice, lower pay, worse conditions, and the threat of execution if captured. Their valor at Fort Wagner in July 1863, charging into withering fire, silenced doubters, proving their stake in freedom's fight. For Lincoln, the proclamation was a gamble, tying the Union's fate to a cause both noble and divisive. It cost him politically. Democrats gained in 1862 elections, decrying his abolition war. It cost soldiers their lives, as the war's intensity grew. And it cost the enslaved, who faced brutal reprisals yet kept running toward freedom. The proclamation was no end, but a beginning, a promise that demanded blood, sacrifice, and a nation reborn. Its echoes would ring through every battle to come. Chapter 11: The Tide Turns at Gettysburg. July 1, 1863, broke warm and clear over Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. A quiet town of cobblestone streets and whitewashed homes. Farmers tended fields, children played, unaware that fate was marching toward them. Two great armies converged: Lee's Army of Northern Virginia, 75,000 strong, invading the North again, and the Union's Army of the Potomac, 90,000 men, now under General George G. Meade. What began as a skirmish over shoes, Confederates seeking a local supply, erupted into a battle that would decide the war's course. Lee's invasion was a bold stroke. After victories at Fredericksburg and Chancellorsville, he aimed to threaten Washington, disrupt Union morale, and force peace talks. His men, lean but fierce, swept into Pennsylvania, seizing livestock and supplies, though Lee forbade harming civilians. Union troops, stung by past defeats, rushed to intercept. On July 1st, Confederate forces clashed with Union cavalry west of Gettysburg, driving them back through the town. Bluecoats rallied on Cemetery Hill, digging in as reinforcements arrived. July 2nd saw the battle's fury unleashed. Lee, seeking to flank the Union line, sent troops against Little Round Top and Devil's Den, Rocky Hills anchoring Meade's left. Union Colonel Joshua Chamberlain's 20th Maine, outnumbered, held Little Round Top with bayonets fixed, repulsing wave after wave. Blood soaked the rocks, men fell gasping, but the hill held. In the center, fierce fighting raged in the peach orchard and wheat field, fields torn by shells, bodies strewn like broken dolls. Night fell, both sides exhausted, the air thick with smoke and cries. On July 3rd, Lee gambled all. Believing the Union center weakened, he ordered pickets charge. 12,000 Confederates marching across open fields toward Cemetery Ridge. Under a blazing sun, they advanced. Flags high, drums rolling, a mile of open ground before them. Union artillery roared, shells bursting, mowing men down. Rifles blazed, smoke choked the air, yet the gray line pressed on. At the stone wall, A few breached the Union line, only to be cut down. The charge collapsed, leaving 7,000 Confederate casualties in an hour. Lee, watching, murmured, "It is all my fault." Gettysburg's toll was staggering: 50,000 casualties, dead, wounded, missing over 3 days. Lee retreated to Virginia, his army crippled, his invasion shattered. Meade, cautious, did not pursue, frustrating Lincoln. Yet, the Union had won a decisive victory, blunting the Confederacy's offensive power. In the North, church bells rang, newspapers hailed glorious triumph. In the South, grief descended, families scanning casualty lists, hope dimming. Gettysburg was more than a battle, it was a turning point. The Confederacy would never again invade the North with such strength. On November 19, 1863, Lincoln dedicated the battlefield cemetery, his brief Gettysburg address redefining the war's purpose: a new birth of freedom for a nation conceived in liberty. For soldiers, the battle was a nightmare of blood and loss. A Union nurse wrote, "I dressed wounds until my hands shook." A Confederate private recalled, "We left our brothers in those fields, and part of our souls with them." Gettysburg marked the war's high tide, where one vision of America began to fade, and another, forged in sacrifice, rose. Chapter 12. The Siege of Vicksburg. Summer 1863 draped the Mississippi River in humid haze, its waters glinting under a merciless sun. Vicksburg, Mississippi, perched on high bluffs, stood as the Confederacy's last bastion on the river, a fortress city, its cannons commanding the waterway, its people defiant. To the Union, Vicksburg was the key to splitting the rebellion, choking its supply lines. To Ulysses S. Grant, it was a challenge to be met with iron will. The siege that unfolded would test not just armies, but the soul of a nation at war. Grant's Army of the Tennessee, 45,000 strong, had fought its way south, crossing swamps and rivers, outmaneuvering Confederate forces. By May 1863, he encircled Vicksburg, trapping 30,000 defenders under General John C. Pemberton. The city's cliffs, bristling with guns, dared the Union to attack. Grant tried twice, storming the defenses on May 19 and 22, but each assault faltered. Bluecoats falling in ravines, their cries echoing off the bluffs. Over 3,000 Union soldiers lay dead or wounded, the cost of haste laid bare. Grant shifted tactics, settling into a siege. Trenches snaked around Vicksburg, Union soldiers digging under fire, their spades striking clay as shells screamed overhead. Cannonades pounded the city day and night, crumbling homes, shattering nerves. Civilians, caught in the trap, burrowed into caves carved from hillsides, their lives a rhythm of hunger and fear. A mother wrote, "We huddle in darkness, praying each boom spares us." Food dwindled, mules, rats, and shoe leather became meals. Confederate soldiers, gaunt and ragged, held their lines, their resolve as stubborn as the bluffs. Grant's grip tightened. Union gunboats on the Mississippi blocked supplies, their shells arcing into the city. By June, starvation stalked Vicksburg streets, children's eyes hollow, soldiers fainting at their posts. Yet Pemberton clung to hope of relief from General Joseph E. Johnston's army, unaware it would never come. Grant, relentless, extended his trenches, inching closer, sapping Confederate morale. A soldier recalled, "We watched them starve, and it broke our hearts, even as enemies." On July 4, 1863, after 47 days, Vicksburg surrendered. Pemberton's men, too weak to march, stacked their rifles, their flags lowered in silence. The Union flag rose over the bluffs, cheers echoing across the river. With Vicksburg's fall, and Port Hudson's days later, the Mississippi was Union-controlled, the Confederacy cleaved in two. Grant's victory, paired with Gettysburg's triumph the same week, electrified the North. Lincoln, long searching for a fighting general, declared, "Grant is my man." For Vicksburg's people, surrender brought relief but ruin. Homes lay in rubble, families mourned, and the river, once their pride, now carried Union steamers. The siege claimed 20,000 lives, soldiers and civilians, its toll etched in sunken eyes and silent graves. For Grant, Vicksburg was a stepping stone, his star rising. His gaze now on Chattanooga. The war's momentum shifted, but its costs grew heavier, each victory a reminder of the blood required to mend a fractured nation. Chapter 13. Chattanooga and the Road to Atlanta. Autumn 1863 painted Tennessee's mountains in crimson and gold, but the air carried the acrid tang of war. Chattanooga, a rail hub nestled in the Appalachians, was the gateway to the Deep South. After Vicksburg, the Union saw it as the path to Atlanta, the Confederacy's industrial heart. The Confederacy saw it as a line to hold at all costs. In November, the hills around Chattanooga became a crucible, where strategy and sacrifice would carve the war's next chapter. The Union's Army of the Cumberland, under General William Rosecrans, had seized Chattanooga earlier, only to be routed at Chickamauga in September 1863. The bloodiest battle in the West, Chickamauga left 34,000 casualties, Union forces retreating to Chattanooga, besieged by General Braxton Bragg's Confederates. Trapped, the Union Army faced starvation, supply lines cut, men eating grass to survive. Lincoln, alarmed, sent Grant to take command, reinforcing him with troops from the Army of the Potomac. Grant arrived, his calm belying the crisis. He opened a supply line, the Cracker Line, restoring food and morale. By late November, he was ready to break the siege. On November 23, Union forces under George H. Thomas stormed Orchard Knob, a Confederate outpost, in a swift, bloody clash. The next day, Joseph Hooker's men scaled Lookout Mountain, fighting through fog and rock, driving Confederates off in the battle above the clouds. Cheers rose as the Union flag waved atop the peak. On November 25, the decisive blow fell at Missionary Ridge. Grant ordered Thomas's men to seize rifle pits at the ridge's base, a limited probe. But the soldiers, weary of retreat, charged up the slope unbidden, scaling cliffs under withering fire. Confederates, stunned, broke and fled, their lines collapsing. A Union private wrote, "We climbed like demons, not knowing why. Only that we must." Bragg's army retreated in disarray, Chattanooga secured. The Union lost 5,800 men, the Confederacy 6,600, but the victory opened the road to Atlanta. Chattanooga's triumph lifted Northern spirits, cementing Grant's reputation. Lincoln promoted him to command all Union armies in March 1864, pairing him with William T. Sherman, a fierce tactician tasked with taking Atlanta. In the South, despair deepened. Bragg's defeat cost him command, replaced by Joseph E. Johnston, who faced Sherman's relentless advance. Chattanooga was no mere battle. It was a hinge, swinging the war toward Union dominance in the West, where railroads and resolve would decide the Confederacy's fate. Chapter 14. Sherman's March to the Sea. Spring 1864 bloomed across Georgia, dogwoods bright against green hills, but war's shadow loomed. William T. Sherman, now commanding the Union's western armies, eyed Atlanta, the Confederacy's industrial and rail hub, 100 miles south of Chattanooga. With 100,000 men, Sherman faced Johnston's 60,000 Confederates. A campaign of maneuver and fire unfolding through forests and rivers. This was no single battle, but a relentless drive that would culminate in a march to reshape the South. Sherman moved in May, his army a blue tide, probing Johnston's defenses. Battles flared, Kennesaw Mountain, Resaca, Dallas, each a brutal dance of trenches and charges. Johnston, outnumbered, retreated, trading space for time, frustrating Sherman but preserving his army. By July, Atlanta's outskirts loomed, and Confederate President Jefferson Davis, impatient, replaced Johnston with John Bell Hood, a bold but reckless commander. Hood attacked at Peachtree Creek and Atlanta, losing heavily, his army bleeding men it could not spare. On September 2, 1864, Atlanta fell. Sherman's troops marched in. Confederate forces fleeing, the city's warehouses torched, black smoke choking the sky. A Union soldier wrote, "We took their heart and it burned." The victory electrified the North, bolstering Lincoln's re-election against anti-war Democrats. In the South, Atlanta's loss was a dagger to morale, families fleeing, newspapers decrying Sherman the barbarian. But Sherman was not done. He saw war as total, not just armies, but will. His next move would break the Confederacy's spirit. In November 1864, Sherman launched his march to the sea, 60,000 men cutting a 60-mile wide swath from Atlanta to Savannah. Leaving supply lines, his army lived off the land, seizing crops, livestock, and supplies. Railroads were twisted into Sherman's neckties, plantations gutted, warehouses razed. Enslaved people, thousands strong, followed the army, their freedom a living rebuke to the Confederacy. Sherman's orders were clear: destroy resources, spare lives where possible. Yet the destruction was vast: homes burned, fields stripped, Georgia's heartland scarred. By December 21st, Sherman reached Savannah, offering it to Lincoln as a Christmas gift. The march left 100 miles of ruin, its cost in dollars millions, in human spirit immeasurable. Southerners wept. Their pride broken, their resources gone. A planter wrote, "We are a conquered people, our land a wasteland." In the North, Sherman was a hero. His march proved the end was near. For the enslaved, it was liberation, their chains falling with each step. Sherman's march was war unmasked, brutal, transformative, a storm that swept away one South and heralded another. Chapter 15. The Wilderness and Cold Harbor. While Sherman carved through Georgia, Virginia's fields bore witness to a different war, grim, relentless, a clash of attrition. In May 1864, Grant, now Union General-in-Chief, launched the Overland Campaign, aiming to crush Lee's Army of Northern Virginia. With 120,000 men, Grant faced Lee's 60,000. A series of battles unfolding in tangled woods and open fields, each more savage than the last. The Wilderness and Cold Harbor would test both men's resolve and the nation's endurance. The Wilderness, a dense thicket west of Fredericksburg, erupted on May 5, 1864. Smoke choked the air, vines snared boots, and musket fire flashed through undergrowth. Men fought blind, regiments lost. Wounded burning as brush caught fire. Grant pressed Lee, their armies locked in a 2-day maelstrom, 17,000 Union and 11,000 Confederate casualties piling up. Unlike past Union generals, Grant did not retreat. He pushed south, his men cheering, sensing a new kind of fight. Battles followed: Spotsylvania, North Anna, each a grind of trenches and blood. By June, Grant reached Cold Harbor, 10 miles from Richmond. On June 3, he ordered a frontal assault on Lee's fortified lines, a decision born of exhaustion and haste. Union troops pinned down were slaughtered 7,000, falling in an hour. A soldier wrote, "We marched to death, and death met us." Grant later called it his greatest regret, the losses haunting him. Cold Harbor's toll was 13,000 Union and 5,000 Confederate casualties, the campaign's total nearing 50,000 for Grant, 30,000 for Lee. Yet Grant's strategy was clear: bleed Lee's smaller army, deny him respite. Lee, masterful but stretched, could not replace his losses. Grant shifted south, targeting Petersburg, Richmond's supply hub, beginning a siege that would choke the Confederacy. The Overland Campaign was no triumph, but a grim necessity, its cost in lives a measure of the war's unyielding demand. For soldiers, the Wilderness and Cold Harbor were nightmares. A Union private wrote, "We sleep among the dead, their faces in our dreams." A Confederate nurse recalled, "Boys came to us without arms, without hope. Civilians felt the war's weight, Northern families buried sons, Southern homes braced for siege." Grant's relentless advance, though costly, signaled the endgame. Lee's army, once invincible, was thinning, its fate tied to Petersburg's trenches and a nation's fading dream. Chapter 16. The Siege of Petersburg. Summer 1864 cloaked Virginia in a haze of dust and despair, the air thick with the scent of gunpowder and earth. Petersburg, a rail hub south of Richmond, pulsed as the Confederacy's lifeline, its tracks carrying supplies to Lee's beleaguered army of northern Virginia. Ulysses S. Grant, bloodied but unbowed from the overland campaign, saw Petersburg as the key to strangling the rebellion. What began as a maneuver in June 1864 stretched into a 9-month siege. A grinding ordeal that would test both armies and herald the war's endgame. Grant's Army of the Potomac, 100,000 strong, slipped south after Cold Harbor, aiming to cut Petersburg's rail lines. Lee, with 50,000 men, raced to defend, entrenching around the city. Initial Union assaults faltered, bluecoats falling in fields raked by Confederate fire. By late June, both sides dug in. Trenches snaking for miles, muddy, claustrophobic ditches where men lived like moles, dodging snipers and shells. A Union soldier wrote, "We sleep in graves, waiting for death or dawn." In July, a bold plan emerged. Pennsylvania miners, once coal diggers, tunneled under Confederate lines, packing 8,000 pounds of gunpowder beneath a fort. On July 30th, the mine detonated, blasting a crater 170 feet wide, hurling men and earth skyward. Union troops charged into the chaos, but poor coordination trapped them in the crater, Confederate fire turning it into a slaughter pen. Nearly 4,000 Union men fell in the Battle of the Crater, a grim testament to courage and folly. The siege settled into attrition. Grant extended his lines, cutting rail lines one by one, stretching Lee's thinning ranks. Skirmishes flared, Weldon Railroad, Reams Station, each chipping away at Confederate strength. Civilians in Petersburg endured shelling, their homes shattered. Food scarce. A woman recalled, "We ate cornbread and hope, both crumbling." Confederate soldiers, ragged and hungry, held on, their loyalty to Lee unwavering despite desertions rising. By spring 1865, the siege's toll was clear. Grant's army, reinforced, outnumbered Lee 2-1. Lee's men, down to 40,000, faced starvation, their lines brittle. On April 2nd, Union assaults broke through at Five Forks, collapsing Lee's right flank. Petersburg fell, Richmond evacuated, its warehouses torched, the Confederate capital a smoldering ruin. The siege claimed 42,000 Union and 28,000 Confederate casualties, its trenches a monument to endurance and loss. For Grant, Petersburg was victory through patience. For Lee, it was the beginning of the end. Chapter 17. Lincoln's Second Triumph. November 1864 brought a chill to Washington, D.C., where gaslights flickered along muddy streets, and the White House stood weary under war's weight. Abraham Lincoln, gaunt and graying, faced a nation divided not just by rebellion but by doubt. The war's endless toll, hundreds of thousands dead, millions spent, fueled cries for peace. Lincoln's re-election hung in the balance, a referendum on his leadership and the Emancipation Proclamation's divisive promise. The Democratic Party, smelling blood, nominated George B. McClellan, a former Union general beloved by soldiers but critical of Lincoln's abolition war. Democrats campaigned for compromise, hinting at peace with the Confederacy, slavery intact. Lincoln, running under the National Union banner with Andrew Johnson, a pro-Union Southerner, stood firm, victory and freedom, no less. Northern voters wavered, exhausted by casualty lists, fearful of more blood. The war's tide turned Lincoln's way. Sherman's capture of Atlanta in September 1864 electrified the North, proof the end was near. Grant's siege of Petersburg, though costly, pinned Lee, draining Confederate hope. Union victories at Mobile Bay and Cedar Creek added momentum. Lincoln rallied voters with quiet resolve, his speeches weaving sacrifice into purpose. a soldier wrote. Old Abe speaks plain, like he knows our pain. On November 8th, Lincoln won, sweeping 212 electoral votes to McClellan's 21, carrying all but 3 states. Soldiers' votes? Cast in camps, Tipke states, their trust in Lincoln unshaken. The popular vote was closer, 55%, but the mandate clear: the Union would fight on, slavery's end non-negotiable. In the South, Jefferson Davis saw Lincoln's victory as a death knell, peace talks fading. A Confederate diarist wrote, "The North has chosen war, and we are doomed." Lincoln's second inauguration, March 4, 1865, dawned wet and somber. His address, brief but profound, offered no triumph but reconciliation. With malice toward none, with charity for all. He urged healing, a nation bound by shared loss. Spectators wept, sensing the war's end nearing. For Lincoln, the victory was bittersweet, his heart heavy with the cost. The election secured his vision. But the path to peace would demand more than votes. It would require grace, and soon, sacrifice. Chapter 18: The Fall of Richmond. April 2, 1865, broke over Richmond with a deceptive calm. Church bells tolling for Sunday services. The Confederate capital, elegant despite war's scars, pulsed with defiance, its streets lined with grand homes and bustling markets. But beneath the surface, panic simmered. Lee's lines at Petersburg, 25 miles south, were crumbling under Grant's relentless pressure. Richmond's fate hung by a thread, and the thread was snapping. At St. Paul's Church, Jefferson Davis sat in his pew, his face etched with strain. A messenger slipped in, handing him a note from Lee. Petersburg was lost, Richmond must be abandoned. Davis rose, pale but composed, and left quietly, government officials trailing. Word spread like fire, evacuation began. Confederate troops set fire to warehouses to deny supplies to the Union, flames leaping skyward, consuming tobacco, cotton, and arsenals. By night, Richmond was an inferno, explosions rocking the city, looters roaming, civilians fleeing. On April 3rd, Union troops, including black regiments, marched in. The 36th U.S. Colored Troops led, their bayonets gleaming, faces alight with pride. Enslaved people, now free, cheered, weeping, embracing soldiers. A woman shouted, "You've brought Jubilee!" White residents watched, some sullen, others relieved. Union forces doused fires, restored order, and raised the stars and stripes over the Capitol, where the Confederate Congress once sat. A Union officer wrote, "We took their city, and their chains fell." Grant did not linger. He pursued Lee, whose army, now 30,000, fled west, seeking supplies and a chance to regroup. Richmond's fall was a mortal blow to the Confederacy, its heart ripped out. Davis and his government fled to Danville, then deeper south, their authority fading. In the North, church bells rang, crowds sang, "Battle Hymn of the Republic." Lincoln visited Richmond on April 4th, walking its streets, mobbed by freedmen. He sat at Davis's desk, a quiet symbol of triumph, but urged restraint. "Let them up easy." Richmond's fall was more than a military loss. It was the Confederacy's soul laid bare. The city, once a symbol of rebellion, now bore witness to freedom's dawn. For the enslaved, it was deliverance. For soldiers, vindication. For Lincoln, a step toward peace. But the war was not over. Lee's army, though battered, marched on, and the final act awaited in the fields of Appomattox. Chapter 19: Surrender at Appomattox. April 9, 1865 dawned soft over Virginia's rolling hills, dogwoods blooming pink against green fields. Appomattox Courthouse, a sleepy village, lay quiet, its brick homes unaware of the history about to unfold. Lee's Army of Northern Virginia, now 28,000 men, staggered west, hungry, ragged, pursued by Grant's 100,000. The Confederacy's dream was fading, but Lee, ever defiant, sought escape to fight another day. Grant, relentless, closed the trap. After Petersburg's fall, Lee fled, aiming for supplies at Lynchburg. Skirmishes flared, Sailor's Creek, Farmville, each draining his army, 8,000 captured in days. By April 8th, Union cavalry under Philip Sheridan blocked Lee's path, seizing Appomattox Station's supplies. Lee's men, down to hardtack and hope, faced encirclement. That night Lee weighed options. Fight or surrender. His officers, gaunt but loyal, urged him to choose peace. Lee agreed, sending a flag of truce. On April 9th, Palm Sunday, Lee and Grant met at Wilmer McLean's parlor. A modest home turned historic stage. Lee, in dress uniform, sword at his side, carried himself with dignity, his face etched with grief. Grant, in muddy field attire, offered respect. His terms generous. Confederate soldiers could go home, keep horses for planting, and face no retribution. Officers kept sidearms, a nod to honor. Lee signed, relief mingling with sorrow. A Confederate aide wrote, "We wept as we stacked our rifles." Outside, Union troops cheered, but Grant silenced them. "The rebels are our countrymen again." Confederate soldiers, paroled, received Union rations, their hunger eased by foes. Over 28,000 surrendered, their flags furled, drums silent. News spread, church bells rang in the north, tears fell in the south. The war, though not formally over, was broken. Other Confederate armies would surrender weeks later, but Appomattox was the end's beginning. For Lee, surrender was duty, sparing his men futile slaughter. He rode back, soldiers saluting, some sobbing. For Grant, it was victory with mercy, a step toward healing. For the nation, Appomattox was closure and challenge, a war ended, a peace to build. A freedman watching said, "We saw the chains break, right there in that parlor." The war's cost, 620,000 dead, millions wounded, a land scarred, loomed large, but Appomattox offered hope, a nation divided might yet mend. Chapter 20. The Assassination of Lincoln. Spring 1865 breathed renewal across Washington, D.C., where cherry blossoms dusted the air and church bells pealed with hope. The war's end at Appomattox, just days prior, had lifted a nation's heart, its people daring to dream of peace. Abraham Lincoln, weary but resolute, walked the White House halls. His lanky frame stooped under 4 years of anguish. He spoke of reconciliation, of binding wounds, his second inaugural's call for malice toward none, echoing in his plans. But fate, cruel and unyielding, had other designs. On April 14th, Good Friday, Lincoln sought respite at Ford's Theater, settling into a box seat with his wife, Mary, to watch Our American Cousin. Laughter filled the air, the play's farce a balm for a war-torn soul. Across the city, John Wilkes Booth, a famed actor and Confederate sympathizer, seethed with rage. To him, Lincoln was a tyrant. His Emancipation Proclamation a theft of Southern honor. Booth, with conspirators, plotted not just murder but chaos, targeting Vice President Andrew Johnson and Secretary of State William Seward to cripple the Union's leadership. At 10:15 p.m., Booth slipped into the theater. His steps silent, a Derringer pistol in hand. The guard, absent, left the box door unguarded. A single shot cracked, the bullet piercing Lincoln's skull, his body slumping forward. Screams erupted. Mary's wail piercing the din. Booth leapt to the stage, shouting, "Sic semper tyrannis!" Thus always to tyrants, his leg breaking in the fall. He limped out, vanishing into the night. The theater froze. Then surged with panic, men carrying Lincoln across the street to a boarding house, his life ebbing on a too-short bed. Surgeons worked through the night, their hands steady but helpless. Mary sobbed. Cabinet members gathered, their faces ashen. At 7:22 a.m., April 15th, Lincoln died, his breath stilling as rain pattered the windows. Secretary Stanton whispered, "Now he belongs to the ages." Church bells tolled, telegraph wires hummed, and a nation plunged into grief. In New York, a girl wrote, the world went quiet, like God himself had paused. In Richmond, freedmen wept, one saying, "He gave us freedom, and they took him." Booth's plot partially succeeded. Seward survived a brutal stabbing. Johnson's attacker fled. Booth, hunted across Virginia, was cornered in a barn on April 26, shot dead resisting capture. His conspirators faced trials, for hanged, their plot a grim epilogue to war's hate. Lincoln's death, meant to shatter the Union, instead unified it in mourning. His funeral train, draped in black, wound 1,700 miles to Springfield, Illinois, millions bowing as it passed. The assassination was a wound deeper than battle, a reminder that peace would be as fragile as victory. Chapter 21: The Cost of War. The Civil War's final shots faded in April 1865, but its echoes lingered in shattered towns, empty chairs, and haunted eyes. From Maine to Texas, the nation surveyed its scars, a toll so vast it defied comprehension. Over 620,000 lay dead, 2% of the population, a loss akin to 6 million today. Fields once green were churned to mud, graves dotting landscapes like grim constellations. Cities like Richmond and Atlanta smoldered, their ruins a testament to war's hunger. Soldiers returned, but not whole. Over 400,000 bore wounds, missing limbs, shattered bones, minds clouded by nightmares. A Union veteran wrote, "I left my leg at Gettysburg, my soul at Antietam." Confederate survivors, paroled and penniless, trudged home to farms reclaimed by weeds. Widows, north and south, draped in black, raised children alone, their futures stolen. Orphans roamed, charity overwhelmed. The war's cost was not just lives but livelihoods. Economies gutted, railroads wrecked, cotton fields fallow. The North, though victorious, staggered under debt. War bonds and taxes had fueled the fight, leaving $2.7 billion owed, a sum dwarfing pre-war budgets. Factories thrived, but workers faced inflation, bread costing triple its 1860 price. In the South, defeat was ruin. Confederate currency, worthless, left planters bankrupt, their wealth and slaves, $3 billion, evaporated with Emancipation. Freedmen, 4 million strong, stepped into freedom with nothing but hope, their labor unpaid, their futures uncertain. Beyond numbers, the war fractured trust. Families split by allegiance buried kin on opposing sides. Churches, once unified, remained divided, their pews echoing sectional hate. The Constitution, strained by secession, faced new questions. What is freedom? Who defines it? Lincoln's absence loomed large, his vision of unity untested. A free woman said, "We're free but hungry, where's the promise?" The war's end was no triumph, but a reckoning, its cost a ledger of blood and dreams, paid by a nation forever changed. Chapter 22: Reconstruction begins. Summer 1865 draped the South in heat and uncertainty, its plantations silent, its cities scarred. The war was over, but peace was a fragile guest. Reconstruction, the task of rebuilding a nation and defining freedom, began under a shadow of grief and division. With Lincoln gone, Andrew Johnson, a Tennessee Unionist, took the helm, his presidency a test of whether a house divided could stand anew. Johnson, a tailor's son, distrusted Southern elites but shared their racial views. His Reconstruction plan, announced in May 1865, was lenient. Southern states could rejoin the Union by pledging loyalty, nullifying secession, and ratifying the 13th Amendment, abolishing slavery. Pardons flowed freely, restoring land to former Confederates. By December, most states complied, electing new governments, often led by ex-Confederates. Black codes emerged, laws restricting freedmen's rights, forcing them into labor contracts akin to slavery. A freedman said, "They took our chains, but not their hate." In the North, outrage grew. Radical Republicans, led by Thaddeus Stevens and Charles Sumner, demanded justice for freedmen and punishment for rebels. They saw Johnson's leniency as betrayal, undermining the war's purpose. Congress, reconvening in December, refused to seat Southern delegates, clashing with Johnson. In 1866, the 14th Amendment was proposed, granting citizenship and equal protection to all born in the U.S. A direct rebuke to black codes. Southern states, defiant, rejected it, stoking Northern resolve. Freedmen, caught in the crossfire, seized agency. They built schools, churches, and communities, their literacy rates soaring despite poverty. The Freedmen's Bureau, a federal agency, aided with food, land, and education, but faced resistance from Southern whites and Johnson's vetoes. Violence flared. Riots in Memphis and New Orleans killed dozens of black citizens, their blood a grim omen. A teacher wrote, "We teach by day, pray by night, fearing the torch." By 1867, Congress, overriding Johnson, imposed military reconstruction, dividing the South into 5 districts under federal troops. States had to draft new constitutions granting black male suffrage. Black voters, empowered, elected hundreds to office, a revolution in democracy. Yet the Ku Klux Klan, born in Tennessee, spread terror, lynching and burning to restore white supremacy. Reconstruction was no mere policy. It was a battle for America's soul, pitting freedom against fear, hope against hate. Chapter 23: The Legacy of the War. As 1865 faded, the Civil War's smoke cleared, revealing a nation transformed yet torn. Its legacy was not a single thread but a tapestry, woven from valor, loss, and unresolved dreams. The Union was preserved, its flag unbroken, but at a cost that lingered in every town, every heart. The war's end marked a new America, one grappling with what it meant to be free, equal, and whole. The 13th Amendment, ratified in December 1865, abolished slavery, erasing a moral stain from the Constitution. 4 million freedmen stepped into citizenship, their labor now their own, their families reunited. Yet, freedom was incomplete. Black codes, violence, and poverty mocked the amendment's promise. The 14th and 15th Amendments, later passed, aimed to secure citizenship and voting rights. But their enforcement faltered, leaving black Americans to fight for decades. A free woman said, "We got the law, but not the land." The war reshaped power. The federal government, once weak, grew mighty, its authority cemented by armies and taxes. States' rights, the Confederacy's cry, were subdued, the Union indivisible. Railroads, telegraphs, and factories spurred by war drove industrial growth, making America a global force. Yet the South languished, its economy shattered, its pride bruised, fueling resentment that echoed for generations. Culturally, the war left scars and stories. Whitman's poetry, Brady's photographs, and soldiers' letters captured its anguish and glory. Memorials rose, Gettysburg's fields, Arlington's graves, hallowed by sacrifice. Yet competing memories emerged, the North's Union War, the South's lost cause, each shaping history's lens. A veteran wrote, "We fought for one flag, but tell different tales." The war's greatest legacy was its question: can a nation born in contradiction fulfill its ideals? It ended slavery but birthed new struggles, Reconstruction's failures, segregation's rise, civil rights' long march. It proved Americans would die for freedom, but left the work of defining it to future generations. The Civil War was no end, but a pivot. Its lessons etched in blood, its hope carried in the hearts of those who dared to rebuild. Chapter 24: The Struggle for Equality. The summer of 1866 sweltered across the South, where fields lay fallow and towns bore the war's scars. Reconstruction, a fragile bridge to a new America, teetered under the weight of hope and hate. For 4 million freedmen, freedom was a word heavy with promise but thin with security. The 13th Amendment had shattered their chains, but the path to equality was a gauntlet of resistance, violence, and broken dreams. The nation, still bleeding from war, faced a new battle, defining what freedom meant. The Freedmen's Bureau, stretched thin, worked to weave freedmen into the nation's fabric. Agents distributed food, built schools, and mediated labor disputes, their offices beacons in a hostile land. Black communities flourished despite odds, churches rose, teachers taught reading by candlelight, and families reunited, their joy a quiet rebellion. In South Carolina, a freedman named Robert Smalls, once a war hero, opened a school, his voice proclaiming, "Knowledge is our sword." By 1867, black literacy climbed, a testament to resilience. Yet, resistance was fierce. Southern whites, embittered by defeat, clung to old hierarchies. Black codes, restrictive laws passed by Southern legislatures, chained freedmen to plantations with vagrancy laws and forced contracts. In Tennessee, a freedman arrested for idleness wrote, "They call it freedom, but it feels like slavery's shadow." Violence surged. The Ku Klux Klan, cloaked in white, rode by night, burning homes, lynching leaders. In Memphis, a 1866 riot left 46 black citizens dead, their churches smoldering, a grim warning of white supremacy's grip. In Washington, radical Republicans fought back. The Civil Rights Act of 1866, passed over President Andrew Johnson's veto, granted citizenship to all born in the U.S., defying the Dred Scott ruling. The 14th Amendment, proposed the same year, promised equal protection, its words a shield for freedmen. Southern states, defiant, rejected it, prompting Congress to tighten its grip. The Reconstruction Acts of 1867 placed the South under military rule, mandating new constitutions and black suffrage. Black voters, empowered, sent 16 to Congress, their presence a revolution in marble halls. But equality remained elusive. Johnson, obstructing Congress. Pardon ex-Confederates, restoring their power. Northern fatigue grew, war-weary voters balked at endless intervention. In the South, freedmen faced economic traps, sharecropping tied them to debt. Land ownership a distant dream. A Georgia teacher wrote, "We vote, but hunger votes louder." The struggle for equality was no mere policy. It was a war of wills, its victories fragile, its costs borne by those who dared to dream of a nation true to its creed. Chapter 25, The Impeachment of Andrew Johnson. Winter 1867 cast a chill over Washington, D.C., where political storms raged fiercer than any battlefield. Andrew Johnson, thrust into the presidency by Lincoln's death, stood at odds with a nation seeking renewal. His leniency toward the South, pardoning rebels and tolerating black codes, clashed with Congress's vision of a reconstructed Union. The radical Republicans, led by Thaddeus Stevens and Benjamin Wade, saw Johnson not as a leader but a barrier, his actions a betrayal of the war's hard-won gains. The clash began with policy. Johnson vetoed the Freedmen's Bureau and civil rights bills, arguing they infringed states' rights. Congress overrode him, their resolve steeled by reports of Southern violence. The Tenure of Office Act, passed in 1867, barred Johnson from firing cabinet members without Senate approval, a leash on his power. When Johnson dismissed Edwin Stanton, the Radical Alliance Secretary of War, in February 1868, Congress seized its chance. On February 24, the House voted 126 to 47 to impeach, the first president to face such a trial. The Senate trial, unfolding in March, gripped the nation. Spectators packed the galleries, newspapers churned headlines, and telegraphs buzzed. Johnson's defense argued he violated no law, the Tenure Act untested. Prosecutors, wielding tales of Southern oppression, charged him with undermining Reconstruction. Senators, torn between duty and politics, weighed the verdict. A conviction required 2/3, 36 of 54 votes. On May 16, the vote fell short, 35 to 19, one shy of removal. 7 Republicans broke ranks, fearing impeachment's precedent over policy disputes. Johnson survived. his presidency limping to its end in 1869. The trial, though failing to oust him, curbed his interference, allowing military reconstruction to proceed. Black voters and Union troops reshaped Southern governments, but the victory was bittersweet. Stevens, dying months later, lamented, "We won the war, but not the peace." In the South, freedmen cheered Congress's stand, yet faced undimmed violence. A Mississippi preacher wrote, "They fight in Washington, but we bleed here." The impeachment was a turning point, exposing the fragility of Reconstruction's gains. It showed a nation wrestling with power, Congress versus President, freedom versus tradition. Johnson's survival emboldened Southern resistance, while galvanizing radicals to push harder. The trial's echo lingered, a reminder that rebuilding a nation demanded not just laws, but courage to enforce them, in a land still divided by war's wounds. Chapter 26: The End of Reconstruction. By 1877, the South simmered under a decade of change, its landscapes altered by war and reform. Reconstruction, a bold experiment in equality, had reshaped the region. Black schools thrived, black legislators drafted laws, and federal troops guarded fragile freedoms. Yet, beneath the surface, resentment festered. The North, weary of conflict, yearned for closure, while Southern whites plotted to reclaim power. The end of Reconstruction was no single moment, but a slow unraveling, its promise fading like ink in rain. The 1876 presidential election proved the tipping point. Republican Rutherford B. Hayes faced Democrat Samuel Tilden, the race hinging on disputed Southern votes. Tilden led in popular votes, but electoral counts in Florida, Louisiana, and South Carolina were contested, marred by fraud and violence. A special commission, leaning Republican, awarded Hayes the presidency in a deal, the Compromise of 1877. Republicans agreed to withdraw federal troops from the South, effectively ending military reconstruction, in exchange for Hayes's victory. By spring 1877, the last Union soldiers left, their boots no longer guarding polling places or courthouses. Southern Democrats, dubbed Redeemers, seized control, dismantling Reconstruction's gains. Black voting plummeted as intimidation, lynchings, beatings, and threats surged. Jim Crow laws emerged, segregating schools, trains, and lives, codifying inequality. A Louisiana freedman wrote, "The soldiers left, and our freedom went with them." Sharecropping trapped black families in debt, their dreams of land ownership buried. In the North, apathy triumphed. War fatigue and economic woes, the Panic of 1873, shifted focus from Southern justice to Northern prosperity. Even radicals softened, their fire dimmed by time. The 14th and 15th Amendments stood, but unenforced, their promise hollow. Black communities, resilient, clung to churches and schools, but faced a new era of oppression. The Klan grew, its terror unchecked, a shadow over the South. Reconstruction's end was a betrayal of the war's ideals. It secured the Union but abandoned millions to a second-class freedom. Hayes called his fraudulency by critics, governed with reform in mind, but could not heal the divide. The South rebuilt its hierarchy, white supremacy cloaked in law. The nation moved on, its eyes forward, but the cost was clear: equality. So fiercely fought for, was deferred, its struggle handed to future generations. Chapter 27: A Nation Transformed. As the 1870s waned, America stood at a crossroads. Its identity forged in the Civil War's crucible. The conflict, costing 620,000 lives and untold dreams, had reshaped a nation once fractured by slavery and secession. The Union endured, its flag unbroken, but the war's legacy was a complex weave of triumph, tragedy, and unfinished work. From its ashes rose a new America, industrial, united, yet haunted by questions of justice and equality. The war abolished slavery, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments enshrining freedom, citizenship, and voting rights. 4 million freedmen. Once property, claimed agency, building schools, churches, and families, their voices rising in state houses. Yet, Reconstruction's collapse left them vulnerable. Jim Crow's rise a stark reminder of freedom's fragility. A Georgia preacher said, "We won the war, but not the peace." The South, economically scarred, leaned on sharecropping, its fields yielding poverty more than progress. Industrially, the war was a catalyst. Northern factories, fueled by war contracts, birthed an economic giant. Railroads stretched, telegraphs hummed, and cities swelled, America's wealth rivaling Europe's. The federal government, once a shadow, grew mighty, its authority cemented by war's demands. Yet this power came at a cost: debt, corruption, and a South left to rebuild alone, its resentment fueling a lost cause myth that glorified Confederate defiance. Culturally, the war reshaped memory. Whitman's verses, Brady's photographs, and soldiers' diaries captured its raw truth, while memorials at Gettysburg and Shiloh hallowed its sacrifice. Yet rival narratives emerged: the North's victory tale, the South's romanticized defeat. These stories shaped history, dividing how Americans saw their past. A veteran wrote, "We fought one war, but tell two tales." The war's greatest legacy was its challenge to fulfill the promise of liberty and justice for all. It ended one injustice but birthed others, segregation and inequality persisting for a century. The Civil War proved a nation could survive division, but only through sacrifice. Its lessons, of courage, cost, and compromise, echoed in civil rights struggles, in debates over equality, in every step toward a more perfect union. The war was over, but its work, like America itself, remained unfinished. Chapter 28: The Rise of the Lost Cause. In the late 1870s, the South stirred under a new kind of rebellion, not of arms, but of memory. Reconstruction's end left the region battered, its economy limping, its pride bruised. From this soil sprouted the lost cause, a myth that recast the Confederacy's defeat as a noble tragedy. It was a story woven in parlors, preached from pulpits, and etched in stone, seeking to heal Southern wounds by reshaping the Civil War's truth. The lost cause painted the Confederacy not as a fight for slavery, but for states' rights and a chivalrous way of life. Robert E. Lee, once a general, became a saint, his defeats spun as heroic stands against overwhelming odds. Monuments rose, stone soldiers gazing defiantly from town squares, their inscriptions honoring valor over cause. In Richmond, the Daughters of the Confederacy, formed in 1894, led the charge, funding statues and textbooks that glorified Dixie's past. A Virginia widow wrote, "We lost the war, but we'll win the story." Slavery, the war's core, was whitewashed. Lost cause advocates claimed it was benevolent, a school for Africans. Its horrors erased. Black suffering was sidelined, their freedom framed as chaos, justifying Jim Crow's rise. Jubal Early, a former Confederate general, penned essays denying slavery's role, his words shaping Southern schoolbooks. By 1900, children learned of gallant rebels, not enslaved millions. A Georgia teacher noted, "We teach myth, not fact." In the North, the lost cause found reluctant acceptance. War-weary Americans craved unity, not truth. Reconciliation meant ignoring slavery's legacy, embracing tales of shared valor. At Gettysburg reunions, blue and gray veterans clasped hands, their battles softened into folklore. Yet, this harmony came at a cost. Black Americans, their emancipation marginalized, faced segregation and silence. A freedman in Alabama said, "They honor their flags, but forget our chains." The lost cause was no mere nostalgia, it was power. It justified white supremacy, underpinned Jim Crow, and shaped a South resistant to change. Its monuments stood as sentinels, its stories as shields. Yet cracks formed. Black scholars like W. B. Du Bois challenged the myth. their voices rising against erasure. The lost cause endured, a shadow over history, its legacy a reminder that wars are fought not just on fields, but in the hearts of those who remember. Chapter 29. The Industrial North and the Agrarian South. As the 1880s dawned, America pulsed with transformation, its regions diverging like rivers from a single source. The Civil War, a crucible of blood, had forged two Americas, the North, a dynamo of industry, and the South, tethered to its agrarian roots. The war's end unleashed economic forces that widened this divide. Shaping a nation both united and estranged, its progress shadowed by inequality. The North surged into an industrial age. Railroads spiderwebbed across plains, their steel tracks carrying coal, iron, and ambition. Factories roared in Pittsburgh, Chicago, and New York, churning out steel, textiles, and machines. The war's demands, uniforms, rifles, ships, had birthed corporations, their wealth eclipsing pre-war dreams. By 1890, America rivaled Britain, its GDP soaring. Immigrants flooded cities, their labor fueling growth, their tenements crowding skylines. A Chicago worker wrote, "We build towers, but live in shadows." Innovation lit the North's path. Edison's bulb glowed, Bell's telephone rang, and Carnegie's steel spanned bridges. Warborne technologies, canned food, sewing machines, became household staples. Yet, prosperity was uneven. Workers faced 12-hour days, strikes crushed by Pinkerton guards. In 1886, Chicago's Haymarket riot left dozens dead, labor's cry drowned in blood. Wealth concentrated, Vanderbilts and Rockefellers amassed fortunes, their mansions mocking the poor. A Boston preacher said, "We've won the war, but lost our soul." The South, by contrast, languished. War had gutted its economy, plantations burned, railroads wrecked, $3 billion in slave wealth gone. Reconstruction's promise of land for freedmen faded, sharecropping trapping black and white farmers in debt. Cotton remained king, its price dictated by northern markets. By 1880, Southern per capita income was half the North's, its schools underfunded, its roads rutted. A Mississippi farmer wrote, "We plow the same dirt, but reap only dust." Yet seeds of change sprouted. Textile mills rose in Carolina Piedmonts, powered by rivers, employing white workers. Railroads rebuilt, linking Atlanta to markets. Black communities, though oppressed, built colleges, Fisk, Howard, nurturing leaders. Still, Jim Crow's grip tightened, segregating progress. The North's wealth and South's poverty were the war's economic legacy, a divide that shaped politics, culture, and dreams, a nation bound by law but split by fortune. Chapter 30. The Civil War in Memory. By the 1890s, the Civil War's smoke had long cleared, but its memory burned bright. A flame tended by victors and vanquished alike. Across America, the war was not just history, but identity, etched in marble, sung in ballads, and debated in parlors. Its legacy was no single truth, but a chorus of voices, each claiming the past to shape the future. From battlefields to books, the war lived on, its meaning as contested as its battles. Memorials rose like sentinels. At Gettysburg, bronze soldiers froze in charge, their plaques hailing Union triumph. In Vicksburg, obelisks mourned Confederate valor, their inscriptions silent on slavery. By 1900, over 1,000 monuments dotted the land, north and south, each acclaimed to glory. Veterans' reunions drew thousands, gray-haired men in blue and gray, swapping stories, their scars a shared language. In 1913, Gettysburg's 50th anniversary saw 50,000 gather, their handshake a fragile peace. A Union veteran wrote, "We fought as foes, but age makes us kin." Literature immortalized the war. Whitman's poems wept for fallen youth, Twain's tales mocked its folly. Southern writers like Thomas Nelson Page spun plantation romances, the lost cause cloaked in nostalgia. In the North, Harper's Weekly printed battle sketches, their drama feeding pride. Black voices, like Frederick Douglass's, cut through, naming slavery's costs, though often ignored. A librarian noted, "Our shelves hold many wars, each book a different fight." Popular culture embraced the war. Dime novels cast rebels as rogues, Yankees as heroes. Songs, Dixie, Battle Hymn of the Republic, stirred hearts, their notes dividing or uniting. Brady's photographs, stark and unyielding, toured galleries, their images of death shocking yet revered. In theaters, plays reenacted Antietam's blood, audiences cheering or weeping. A New York critic said, "The war is gone, but its ghost plays on." Yet memory was selective. The North celebrated emancipation, but skirted Reconstruction's failure. The South embraced the lost cause, erasing black suffering. Freedmen, their stories oral, past truths in churches, their history sidelined. The war's memory was a mirror, reflecting what each region wished to see: a unified nation, a noble defeat, a freedom deferred. Its legacy was not just remembrance, but the power to choose what endured, and what was forgotten. Chapter 31: The War's Lasting Impact. As the 19th century waned, the Civil War stood as America's defining wound and crucible. Its scars shaping a nation's body and soul. Over 620,000 dead, millions wounded, and a land ravaged had forged a new America, one stronger, yet fractured, its ideals tested by fire. The war's impact rippled through politics, society, and culture, its lessons a guide and warning for generations tasked with mending a house divided. Politically, the war cemented federal power. The Union's victory crushed secession, the Constitution's supremacy unchallenged. The 14th and 15th Amendments, though poorly enforced, redefined citizenship and suffrage, planting seeds for future struggles. The Republican Party, born of abolition, dominated for decades, its tariffs and railroads driving growth. Yet the South's democratic, solid South emerged. Its white supremacy a rebuke to Reconstruction. A senator wrote, "The war ended rebellion, but not division." Socially, the war shattered slavery, freeing 4 million. Their emancipation a moral triumph. Yet Jim Crow's rise mocked this victory, segregating schools, jobs, and lives. Black Americans, resilient, built institutions, churches, colleges, despite terror. The war also spurred women's roles: nurses, spies, organizers, paving paths to suffrage. Immigration surged, fueled by northern industry, reshaping cities. A Chicago preacher said, "The war freed some, but chained others anew." Economically, the war birthed modern America. Northern factories, war-forged, led a global industrial boom, while the South's agrarian struggle persisted. Its poverty a stark contrast. Railroads and telegraphs, war's tools, knit a continental economy, but wealth gaps widened, millionaires rose, workers struck. The war's $5 billion cost in lives and coin fueled debates over government's role, from pensions to taxes. Culturally, the war redefined identity. It proved Americans would die for principle, but left questions. Who is American? What is freedom? Memorials, literature, and reunions kept the war alive, its rival narratives, Union victory, lost cause, shaping history's lens. Black voices, though marginalized, persisted, their truth a slow-burning fire. The war's greatest impact was its challenge to fulfill liberty and justice for all. Its legacy was not closure, but a call to action. A nation forever tasked with becoming what it promised. Chapter 32: The Civil War and Civil Rights. As the 20th century dawned, the Civil War's shadow stretched long across America. Its promise of freedom unfulfilled for millions. The war had abolished slavery, birthed the 14th and 15th Amendments, and ignited hope for equality. But Reconstruction's collapse left Black Americans ensnared in Jim Crow's grip. Yet, the war's ideals, liberty, justice, burned in the hearts of those who fought for civil rights. Their struggle a direct echo of the conflict's unfinished work. In the South, segregation ruled, its laws carving a world of separate but equal. That was neither. Black citizens faced disenfranchisement, poll taxes, literacy tests, and lynchings crushed their vote. By 1900, fewer than 5% of black Southerners voted, a stark reversal from Reconstruction's peak. Schools were underfunded, jobs menial, and public spaces divided by color lines. A Mississippi preacher wrote, "The war gave us freedom, but the peace took it back." Yet resistance stirred. Black leaders, inspired by the war's legacy, rose to challenge oppression. W. B. Du Bois, a scholar forged in the North, demanded full equality. His 1903 Souls of Black Folk a clarion call against compromise. Booker T. Washington, born enslaved, urged economic uplift through education, his Tuskegee Institute a beacon. Both drew from the war's moral fire, Du Bois citing Lincoln's emancipation, Washington the courage of black Union soldiers. In 1909, the NAACP formed. Its mission rooted in the 14th Amendment's promise. The Civil War's memory-fueled activism. Frederick Douglass's speeches, reprinted, inspired rallies. Black veterans of the war, though aged, spoke at churches, their medals proof of sacrifice. In 1915, D.W. Griffith's Birth of a Nation glorified the Klan, but black protests, citing the war's truth, forced bans in cities. By the 1950s, the civil rights movement swelled. Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King Jr., and John Lewis invoked the war's ideals. King's 1963 "I Have a Dream" speech, delivered at Lincoln's memorial, echoed the Gettysburg Address, demanding a new birth of freedom. The war's amendments, long dormant, became weapons. The 1954 Brown v. Board ruling, striking segregation, leaned on the 14th Amendment. The Voting Rights Act of 1965, spurred by Selma's blood, fulfilled the 15th. Each victory was a debt paid to the war's dead, black and white, who fought for liberty. A Birmingham activist said, "Gettysburg's ghosts march with us." The civil rights struggle was the war's second act, its legacy a reminder that freedom's price is eternal vigilance. Chapter 33. The war's influence on American politics. The Civil War's cannons fell silent in 1865, but their reverberations shaped American politics for generations, redrawing the nation's power map. The conflict crushed secession, strengthened the federal government, and birthed a political landscape defined by the war's victories and failures. From Capitol Hill to county courthouses, the war's legacy was a fault line, dividing parties, regions, and visions of America's future. The Republican Party, forged in abolition's fire, emerged dominant. Its bloody shirt, rhetoric, waving the war's sacrifice, securing Northern votes. From 1865 to 1896, Republicans held the presidency for 20 years, their policies, tariffs, railroads, veterans' pensions, fueling industrial growth. Lincoln's shadow loomed, his martyrdom a rallying cry. Yet, their abandonment of Reconstruction by 1877, trading black rights for power, stained their legacy. A Chicago editor wrote, "They won the war, but sold the peace." The Democratic Party, tainted by secession, retreated to the South, becoming the Solid South by 1880. White Democrats, wielding the lost cause, restored supremacy through violence and fraud, disenfranchising black voters. Nationally, Democrats championed states' rights, opposing federal overreach. Their platform a nod to pre-war ideals. Yet, Northern Democrats, often urban immigrants, split the party, diluting its power. A Tennessee voter said, "The war made us Democrats, but hate keeps us so." The war birthed new debates. Federal power, expanded by war, sparked clashes. Should Washington build railroads or protect rights? The 14th Amendment, meant for freedmen, shielded corporations. By 1900, its equal protection twisted. Veterans' pensions, costing billions, foreshadowed welfare state battles. Sectionalism persisted. Northern industry versus Southern agriculture. each region's needs shaping Congress. A senator noted, "The war ended, but North and South still vote apart." By the 20th century, the war's political legacy evolved. Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal, centralizing power, echoed war-era federalism. The Civil Rights era, driven by war-born amendments, realigned parties. Democrats embraced equality, Republicans courted Southern whites. The war's questions, federal versus state, liberty versus order, endured. Its impact a framework for every political fight, a nation forever wrestling with its unity and its ideals. Chapter 34: The War and American Identity. The Civil War, a tempest of blood and ideals, did more than preserve the Union. It forged a new American identity, one both unified and fractured. Before 1861, Americans were Virginians or New Yorkers first, their nation a loose bond. By 1865, the war had welded them into Americans, a people bound by shared sacrifice, yet divided by rival visions of what that identity meant. Its legacy was a mirror, reflecting a nation's pride and pain. The war birthed a national mythos. Gettysburg, Shiloh, and Appomattox became sacred ground, their stories told in schools, sermons, and songs. The flag, once a symbol, became a shrine. Its stars unbroken, its stripes blood-stained. Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, brief but eternal, redefined America as a nation, conceived in liberty, its purpose to endure. A Boston teacher wrote, "We teach the war to know who we are." Yet identity split along fault lines. In the North, the war was a triumph of freedom, its heroes Lincoln and Grant, its cause emancipation. In the South, the lost cause crafted a defiant identity. Lee's honor, Dixie's pride, slavery erased. Black Americans, free but oppressed, forged their own narrative, rooted in survival and struggle. Their spirituals and stories claiming a place in the nation's soul. A free woman said, "We're American, but America don't see us." The war reshaped belonging. Immigrants fighting in Union ranks earned citizenship. Irish, Germans, Italians woven into the nation's fabric. Women, serving as nurses and spies, demanded voice, their war work fueling suffrage. Veterans, blue and gray, formed bonds in Grand Army of the Republic halls, their scars a shared badge. Yet, exclusion persisted. Black veterans faced segregation, Native Americans displacement. Their place in America contested. Culturally, the war unified through memory. Whitman's poetry, Brady's photographs, and Uncle Tom's Cabin became national touchstones, their truths crossing borders. By 1900, Memorial Day, born of war graves, was a national rite, its poppies uniting grief. Yet rival memories, Union victory, Confederate defiance, kept wounds open. The war's identity was a paradox. One nation, many stories, its legacy a call to reconcile who Americans were with who they aspired to be. Chapter 35: The war's global influence. The Civil War, fought on American soil, sent ripples across the globe, its battles echoing in courts, factories, and revolutions far beyond. From 1861 to 1865, the world watched, its nations shaped by the conflict's outcomes, slavery's fall, the Union's survival, and the rise of a new power. The war was not just America's, it was a pivot in global history, its lessons reshaping empires and ideals. Europe, gripped by cotton fever, felt the war's sting. The South's blockade slashed supplies, mills in Lancashire and Lyon idling, workers starving. Britain, tempted to aid the Confederacy, hesitated. Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation swayed public opinion, abolitionists rallying. By 1865, Britain's neutrality cemented, its empire eyeing America's industrial might. A London worker wrote, "America's war saved our souls, but emptied our pockets." The war's military innovations, ironclads, railroads, telegraphs, revolutionized warfare. Prussia, studying Grant's campaigns, adopted total war tactics, its 1870 victory over France a nod to American strategy. Gatling guns and trench warfare, born in Virginia's fields, foreshadowed World War I's carnage. A German officer noted, "America's war taught us how to fight, and how to dread." Politically, the war inspired movements. Lincoln's emancipation fueled abolition in Brazil and Cuba, slavery falling by 1888. The Union's survival emboldened nationalists, Italy's unification, Germany's rise, while warning empires of rebellion's cost. In Mexico, the war's distraction let France invade, but Union victory aided Juárez's triumph by 1867. A Mexican rebel said, "Lincoln's fight gave us courage." Economically, the war birthed an American titan. By 1870, U.S. industry rivaled Europe's, its railroads and steel drawing global investment. The South's cotton, freed from slavery, reshaped markets, though sharecropping echoed old chains. The war's debt and tariffs set models for state-led growth, studied in Japan and Russia. The war's global legacy was clear: a nation's fight for freedom could shake the world, its ideals and iron forging a new era. Chapter 36. Technological Advancements Born of War. The Civil War's crucible, forged in blood and fire, birthed a technological revolution that reshaped America and the world. From 1861 to 1865, necessity drove invention, as the demands of battle, supplying armies, moving men, killing efficiently, sparked innovations that outlived the conflict. Railroads, telegraphs, and ironclads, born in the war's urgency, laid the foundation for a modern nation, their hum and clang echoing into the future. Railroads, the war's arteries, transformed logistics. The Union's 20,000 miles of track carried troops, food, and cannons with unprecedented speed, linking battlefields to factories. The Confederacy, with half the rail, struggled, its lines crumbling under overuse. Engineers standardized gauges, rebuilt bridges, and armored trains, their work a blueprint for post-war expansion. By 1870, transcontinental railroads owed their scale to war's lessons. A conductor wrote, "The war taught us to move armies, then nations." The telegraph, a web of wires, shrank distance. Lincoln, glued to the War Department's telegraph office, received battlefield reports in hours, not days. Operators sent 6,000 messages daily, coordinating campaigns from Shiloh to Gettysburg. The war's demand for speed birthed Western Union's dominance, its lines stitching America together. A telegraph clerk noted, "We wired the war, and it wired our future." Naval warfare evolved with ironclads. The 1862 clash of the Monitor and Merrimack at Hampton Roads, their iron plates deflecting cannonballs, ended wooden fleets. Steam-powered gunboats, like those on the Mississippi, choked Confederate rivers. Post-war, navies worldwide adopted ironclads, America's designs leading. A sailor recalled, "Our ships were iron, our will steel." Smaller innovations abounded. Rifled muskets, accurate at 500 yards, made battles deadlier, their mass production a model for industry. Canned food, feeding Union armies, became a household staple. Medical advances, ambulances, triage, anesthesia, saved lives, though thousands still perished. The war's Gatling gun, a precursor to machine guns, hinted at future carnage. A surgeon wrote, "Or build tools to kill, and some to save." These advancements, born of necessity, propelled America into an industrial age. Railroads and telegraphs knit a continent, ironclads secured global influence, and factories churned out progress. Yet each bore war's mark, tools of destruction turned to creation, their legacy a testament to a nation's ingenuity and cost. Forging a modern world from a divided land's ashes. Chapter 37. The war's impact on women. The Civil War tore at America's fabric, but for women, it was a crucible of change, shattering old roles and forging new paths. From battlefield nurses to spies, from factory workers to plantation managers, women stepped into the war's chaos. their courage and labor reshaping their place in society. Though the conflict ended, its ripples carried women toward greater agency, their war-born roles a spark for future fights. In the North, women filled gaps left by men. Factories hummed with female hands sewing uniforms, packing cartridges, and forging steel. In Boston and Philadelphia, women ran businesses, their ledgers balancing war's demands. The U.S. Sanitary Commission, led by women like Clara Barton, raised funds, supplied hospitals, and comforted the wounded. Barton, dodging bullets at Antietam, earned the title Angel of the Battlefield. She wrote, "War called us, and we answered." In the South, women faced harsher trials. With men gone, they managed plantations, bartered for food, and hid supplies from Union raiders. Enslaved women, doubly burdened, worked fields and resisted, many fleeing to Union lines. White Southern women, like Mary Chestnut, chronicled the war's toll, their diaries raw with loss. Chestnut wrote, "Our world burns, and we hold the ashes." Some, like Belle Boyd, spied for the Confederacy, their daring defying convention. Nursing was the war's great equalizer. Over 20,000 women, North and South, served in hospitals, their hands dressing wounds, their voices soothing dying men. Dorothea Dix organized Union nurses, demanding discipline. Southern women, untrained, worked amid chaos. Black nurses, often free women, faced prejudice yet persevered. A Richmond nurse recalled, "We saw death daily, but gave life where we could." The war's end brought mixed gains. Women's war work fueled suffrage movements, their contributions undeniable. Leaders like Susan B. Anthony cited nurses and spies, demanding votes for service. Yet many returned to old roles. Northern factories favored men, Southern women faced poverty. Black women, free but marginalized, built schools, their labor unsung. The war cracked the door to equality, but only time and struggle would push it open, its legacy a call for women to claim their place. Chapter 38. The War and African American Communities. The Civil War's end in 1865 was a jubilee for 4 million black Americans, their chains broken by the 13th Amendment. Yet freedom was a beginning, not an end, its promise shadowed by violence and want. The war transformed African American communities, forging resilience, identity, and a fierce fight for dignity in a nation reluctant to grant it. Their story was the war's heart, its legacy their unyielding pursuit of justice. Emancipation unleashed agency. Freedmen built schools, churches, and mutual aid societies, their communities pulsing with purpose. In Atlanta and Richmond, black churches became hubs, their pews hosting sermons and strategy. By 1870, black literacy rose from 5% to 20%. Fueled by Freedmen's Bureau schools and teachers like Charlotte Fortin. A freedman in Georgia said, "We read to know we're free." Families, torn by slavery, reunited, their searches filling newspaper ads. The war's black soldiers, 180,000 strong, were its unsung heroes. The 54th Massachusetts, charging Fort Wagner, proved their valor, their losses silencing doubters. Post-war, these veterans led communities, their pensions and pride hard-earned. Yet they faced betrayal. Black codes restricted movement, sharecropping trapped families. And the Ku Klux Klan's terror, lynchings, burnings, targeted leaders. In 1866, Memphis riots killed 46 black citizens, a grim echo of slavery's hate. Politically, black Americans seized the moment. Reconstruction's black suffrage sent 2,000 to office, senators, legislators, sheriffs. Hiram Revels, the first black senator, took Jefferson Davis's seat, a poetic justice. Yet by 1877, federal troops' withdrawal unleashed voter suppression, erasing gains. A South Carolina voter wrote, "We voted once, but fear keeps us silent now." Still, black communities endured, their newspapers and conventions planning for a long fight. The war's legacy for black Americans was dual. liberation, and struggle. It gave them freedom, but not equality, voice, but not safety. Their institutions, churches, schools, families, became fortresses, their resilience a rebuke to oppression. The war's amendments, though faltering, were their tools, wielded in later battles from Selma to Washington. The Civil War was their emancipation, but their fight, born in its blood, was for a nation to honor its promise. Chapter 39. The War's Veterans. The Civil War's end left America a nation of survivors, none more marked than its veterans. Over 2 million fought, their lives reshaped by battle's crucible, Gettysburg's fields, Shiloh's mud, Antietam's blood. Blue and gray, they returned to a changed land, their bodies and minds bearing scars that time could not erase. Their legacy was not just survival, but a reshaping of America's heart, their stories a bridge between war and peace. Union veterans, over 1.5 million, came home as heroes, their victory celebrated in parades. The Grand Army of the Republic, formed in 1866, united them, its halls echoing with tales of valor and loss. Pensions, a war-born innovation, supported thousands, though bureaucracy delayed aid. By 1890, $150 million annually went to veterans, a testament to their sacrifice. A New York soldier wrote, "We saved the Union, but the Union must save us." Confederate veterans, nearly 800,000, faced a bitter homecoming. Defeated, many returned to ruined farms, their currency worthless, their pride wounded. The United Confederate Veterans, founded in 1889, offered solace, their reunions weaving the lost cause myth. No pensions came from a fallen government, leaving many destitute. A Virginia veteran said, "We fought for home, but home is gone." Some joined Union veterans at joint reunions, their handshakes tentative, their memories raw. Physical scars were legion, 200,000 wounded, many limbless. Prosthetics crude but innovative dotted towns, while hospitals overflowed. Mental wounds called soldier's heart haunted thousands, nightmares, tremors, despair. A Pennsylvania veteran wrote, "I see Antietam in my sleep. It's dead calling." Communities, north and south, struggled to care for them, asylums and almshouses swelling. Veterans shaped post-war America. Their votes swayed elections. Their stories filled books, their reunions, Gettysburg in 1913, symbolized healing. Black veterans, 180,000 strong, faced unique trials, their service mocked by Jim Crow. Yet their leadership fueled civil rights. The war's veterans were its living memory, their lives a testament to courage and cost. Their legacy a call to honor sacrifice by building a nation worthy of their blood. Chapter 40. The War in Literature and Art. As the Civil War's echoes faded into the late 19th century, its stories found new life in ink and canvas, shaping America's soul through literature and art. The conflict, with its heroism, horror, and heartbreak, became a wellspring for creators, their works capturing a nation's struggle and sewing its fractured identity. From poems to paintings, the war's legacy was not just remembered, it was reimagined. Its truths and myths woven into America's cultural tapestry. Poets gave voice to the war's raw emotion. Walt Whitman, a nurse in Union hospitals, poured grief into leaves of grass. His lines mourning, "The dead, the dead, the dead," while celebrating the Union's endurance. His, "Oh Captain, my Captain," wept for Lincoln, a fallen leader guiding a battered ship to shore. In the South, poets like Sidney Lanier cast Confederates as tragic knights, their cause lost but noble, feeding the lost cause myth. A New Orleans reader wrote, "Their words make our pain immortal." Novelists spun tales that shaped memory. Uncle Tom's Cabin by Harriet Beecher Stowe, though pre-war, lingered, its moral fire fueling abolition's echo. Post-war, Stephen Crane's The Red Badge of Courage, 1895, stripped war of glory, its young soldier facing fear in raw detail. Southern writers like Thomas Nelson Page romanticized plantations, their stories erasing slavery's cruelty. Black authors, like Francis Harper, countered with novels of freedmen's struggles, their voices sharp but often unheard. A librarian noted, "Each book fights its own war. Art captured the war's visceral truth." Matthew Brady's photographs, stark and unyielding, brought battlefields to parlors, Antietam's dead. Gettysburg's ruins shocking viewers. Painters like Winslow Homer depicted soldiers' quiet moments, campfires, letters home, their canvases blending grit and grace. Confederate monuments, rising in southern squares, glorified Lee and Jackson, their stone faces silent on slavery. Black artists, though rare, painted Emancipation's hope, their work preserved in churches. An Atlanta critic said, "Art holds our war's mirror, showing what we choose to see." These works were more than art, they were memory's battleground. Northern art hailed victory. Southern art mourned defeat, and black art demanded justice. They shaped how generations saw the war, their images and words a bridge between past and present, urging America to confront its truths or embrace its myths. Chapter 41: The Economic Transformation. The Civil War's end in 1865 unleashed an economic tide that reshaped America, its ripples forging a nation of steel and ambition. The conflict, costing $5 billion and countless lives, had shattered the South's agrarian core while igniting the North's industrial might. By the 1880s, the war's economic legacy was clear: a modern economy born in blood, its wealth uneven, its promise shadowed by disparity. In the North, war was a catalyst. Factories, churning out rifles and uniforms, grew into industrial giants. Pittsburgh's steel mills roared, Chicago's railroads sprawled, and New York's banks swelled with war bonds. By 1870, the U.S. rivaled Europe, its GDP doubling in a decade. The war's innovations, standardized parts, canned goods, fueled mass production. Railroads, 30,000 miles by 1865, stretched to the Pacific, knitting a continental market. A factory worker wrote, "War built our machines, and they built our wealth." The South, gutted by defeat, limped forward. Plantations, once thriving on enslaved labor, lay in ruins, $3 billion in slave wealth gone. Sharecropping trapped black and white farmers in debt, cotton their only coin. By 1880, Southern income was half the North's, its schools and roads crumbling. Yet change stirred. Textile mills sprouted in the Carolinas, Birmingham's iron industry rose. A Georgia farmer said, "We plow old fields, but dream of new factories." The war centralized power. Federal spending, from pensions to railroads, set a model for government's role. War bonds birthed a national banking system, Wall Street's star rising. Yet, inequality grew. Rockefellers and Carnegies amassed fortunes, while workers faced strikes and starvation wages. The 1873 panic exposed fragility, unemployment soaring. Black freedmen, landless, bore the worst, their labor feeding northern wealth. A preacher noted, "The war freed us, but the economy chained us anew." The war's economic legacy was dual: a nation propelled to global power, yet divided by wealth's uneven hand. The North's factories and South's fields, linked by railroads, formed one economy, but two realities. The war's cost, human and dollar, built a modern America. Its promise of prosperity a beacon, its inequities a challenge for generations to come. Chapter 42: The war's role in American expansion. The Civil War, a struggle for the nation's soul, also paved the path for its growth, stretching America's borders and ambitions. By crushing secession, the war unified the nation, clearing the way for westward expansion and global influence. From the Great Plains to the Pacific, the war's legacy fueled a manifest destiny reborn, its triumphs and tensions shaping a continental empire. The war secured the West. Union victory ensured federal control, blocking Confederate claims to territories like Arizona and New Mexico. The Homestead Act of 1862, passed amid war, offered 160 acres to settlers, drawing thousands to Nebraska and Kansas. Railroads, war's lifeline, became expansion's engine. The Transcontinental Railroad, completed in 1869, linked east to west. Its tracks laid by war veterans and immigrants. A settler wrote, "The war kept us one, so we could claim the frontier." Military might, honed in battle, turned westward. Union armies, disbanded in 1865, reformed to fight Native American tribes, their resistance crushed by tactics learned at Shiloh and Antietam. The Sioux and Cheyenne, defending their lands, faced campaigns like the Sand Creek Massacre, 1864, war's brutality extended. By 1890, the frontier was closed, Native nations confined to reservations. A Lakota elder said, "The white man's war took our freedom, too." Economically, the war fueled expansion. Northern industry, supercharged by war contracts, demanded markets and resources. Gold rushes in Colorado and California, accelerated by war's demand, drew miners and merchants. The Morrill Act of 1862 funded land-grant colleges, training engineers for Western growth. The South, though lagging, sent cotton to global markets, its ports bustling again. A San Francisco trader wrote, "War's wealth pushed us to the Pacific." Globally, the war elevated America. The Union's naval power, with ironclads and blockades, signaled a rising force. By 1867, the U.S. bought Alaska, its first step beyond the continent, war's confidence emboldening the purchase. The war's legacy was a nation unbound, its borders stretched, its ambition ignited. Yet, expansion came at a cost: native displacement, environmental strain, and a South left behind, a reminder that growth, like war, carried a heavy price. Chapter 43: The Civil War's Enduring Lessons. The Civil War's final shots faded into history's echo, but its lessons, carved in the sacrifice of 620,000 souls, resonate like a bell across time. The war was not merely a clash of armies but a reckoning with America's soul, its promise of liberty tested against its practice of oppression. From the blood-soaked fields of Antietam to the quiet surrender at Appomattox, the conflict taught truths about unity, sacrifice, and justice, urging a nation to rise above its divisions and honor its ideals. The lesson of unity, forged in the war's fire, remains paramount. The Union's survival proved that a nation, though torn by discord, could endure through shared purpose. Yet the war's cost, brother against brother, North against South, revealed that unity demands more than victory. It requires forgiveness and shared memory. Lincoln's vision of malice toward none called for a nation not just stitched together by law, but bound by empathy. Today, as debates over flags and statues revive old wounds, the war whispers, "Unity is fragile, earned daily through dialogue, not denial." A Chicago teacher wrote, "We study the war to learn how to live together." Sacrifice, the war's grim currency, taught its own truth. Soldiers fell in numbers staggering: 50,000 at Gettysburg, 23,000 at Shiloh, each a legacy of courage and loss. Civilians, too, paid, widows wove clothes, freedmen braved freedom's uncertainty, and children grew up fatherless. The war showed that progress is not free, it is bought with lives, with the resolve to face pain for a greater good. Veterans, limping home, carried this burden, their scars a silent story. A Vicksburg nurse wrote, "Every grave is a lesson, nothing endures without cost." The war's sacrifice asks us to honor it not with wreaths, but by building a nation worth dying for. Justice, the war's hardest lesson, remains its most urgent. The Emancipation Proclamation and the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments promised equality. Yet Reconstruction's collapse left Black Americans to fight for it, through Jim Crow's chains, through Selma's bridge, through today's streets. The war showed that justice is not a single act but a relentless pursuit, its victories fragile without vigilance. Black soldiers, like those of the 54th Massachusetts, gave their lives for a freedom they barely tasted, their valor a debt unpaid. A Selma marcher said, "The war freed our ancestors, We march for their dream. The war's lessons challenge us to confront inequality, to ensure the amendment's words live in action. Beyond its battlefields, the war taught resilience. A nation rebuilt from ashes, railroads reknit, cities restored, freedmen's schools raised, proved America's spirit could bend but not break. Yet, resilience meant facing truth. The lost cause myth, cloaking slavery's sin, showed how denial distorts history, while black voices, from Douglas to King, showed how truth heals. The war's memorials, from Arlington's graves to Confederate statues, spark questions. Whom do we honor? What do we forget? A historian wrote, "The war's lesson is to face our past, not flee it." The Civil War's enduring lesson is hope. Despite its horrors, it proved a nation could change. Slavery fell, a union stood, and freedom, though imperfect, took root. Its cost, lives, land, innocence, was a down payment on a dream. A nation, conceived in liberty, striving to be, for all. As America grapples with division, inequality, and memory, the war's voice endures, urging us to unite, sacrifice, and seek justice, to forge a future worthy of those who fell. The war is not past, it is present, its lessons a compass for a nation ever becoming. Epilogue: the war that never ends. The Civil War. A storm that raged from 1861 to 1865 left America forever changed, its fields scarred, its soul reshaped. Over 620,000 lives were lost, their blood soaking the soil from Bull Run to Appomattox. Their sacrifice a ledger of a nation's cost. The war ended slavery, preserved the Union, and birthed a new America, yet its echoes linger, a restless spirit in the nation's heart. It was not just a conflict, but a mirror, reflecting who Americans were, and who they might become. In the quiet of dawn, one can almost hear the war's whispers. At Gettysburg, where 50,000 fell, the wind carries the cries of soldiers, blue and gray, their courage etched in stone. In Vicksburg's bluffs, the Mississippi murmurs of starvation and surrender, a city's defiance broken. In Richmond's streets, where freedmen cheered Union troops, the air holds Jubilee's joy and Jim Crow's betrayal. These places, hallowed by blood, are more than history, they are America's conscience, urging remembrance and reckoning. The war's legacy is a tapestry of triumph and tragedy. The 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments promise freedom, citizenship, and the vote. Their words a beacon for 4 million freedmen stepping into a new dawn. Yet, Reconstruction's fall, the rise of segregation, and the lost causes myths dim that light, leaving black Americans to fight for rights their ancestors died for. From Selma's bridge to today's streets, their struggle is the war's unfinished verse, a call to honor emancipation's debt. A Harlem poet wrote, "The war freed our bodies, we still free our souls." It reshaped a nation's bones. Railroads and factories, born of war's need, thrust America into an industrial age, its wealth rivaling empires. The federal government, once frail, grew mighty, its power a shield and a sword. Yet the South's poverty, the North's greed, and the West's conquests, built on native blood, revealed progress's price. The war taught that unity demands sacrifice, but also justice, its lessons carved in the lives of veterans, widows, and freedmen who rebuilt from ashes. Culturally, the war is eternal. Women's poems, Brady's photographs, and the spirituals of the enslaved weave a narrative of pain and hope. Monuments, from Arlington's graves to Confederate statues, spark debates. What do we honor? What do we erase? The war's rival memories, Union victory, Southern defiance, Black resilience, shape how America sees itself, a nation of many truths. A Memphis singer said, "We sing the war's songs, each note a different story." The Civil War never truly ended. Its questions, of liberty, equality, and unity, pulse in every generation's fight. It taught that a nation can survive division, but only by facing its sins, embracing its sacrifices, and chasing its ideals. from Lincoln's call for charity for all to King's dream of justice, the war's spirit endures, urging America to be more than it was. As the nation stands at new crossroads, the war's voice remains, a challenge to build, from its broken past, a future whole and free.